Hey, how are you, Lauren?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay. You've had an eventful day. You okay?
We had to do 2 referrals, okay, 2 different ones, and our district makes us call the Indiana County office first.
Yeah, but then you also call the state one too, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Well, when you call the Indiana County one, her reply to us today was, when we called, because we had called before I sent you that message, and I was like, is there anything else we can do? Because I'm thinking like there has to be something.
Edsp.
Anyway, she said, well, he's 18, there's nothing we can do. And just said, and that was like, she was short and sweet. He's never had a case of, there's nothing we can do, he's 18 or older. So with the other case, we called, it was about a boy who has needs on Sunday. She said, how do you know he's not lying to you?
Published in a journal for Krista.
And then, I mean, like, so this isn't the first 2 this year. Last year I didn't make one.
What time are you
And
guys
it was
leaving?
really cool. She's diabetic, severely diabetic. Family had no power. So hasn't eaten, taken a shower.
I'm going now. Yeah.
The lady told me it was on the same lady. We keep getting the same lady.
Yeah.
So it's like an hour.
She said it'll be on the streets without
I
power.
only have to drive like 35 minutes.
And I said, well, that is their choice. Like, she's so subjective.
Oh,
She
you're
just
going.
keeps asking questions. Like, well, I have to do what I do.
Yeah. That's not your job to be investigating.
Exactly.
Kerwinsville.
So, but then when you call,
Which is like
the main office.
Yeah, the hotline, yeah.
Yeah, they are very actually quite, you know,
Yeah.
they're
It's like closer to state
like,
college.
oh, this lady.
Well, the other reason to call the state one is because while the county level, they're supposed to track all calls. I don't know about this county, but the county that I used to reside in, they did a horrible, same type of situation you experienced. But at the state level, they track every single, they log every single phone call, like, so they will follow up, they have to.
That's what they told me.
The county is supposed to as well, but they frequently don't.
Exactly, and it's so frustrating because then and then when I told the lady supervisor,
I actually met her last week.
I said, like, but why do, I said, I understand, and then you're thinking the same way you told people that so, you know,
Sorry. It's not our problem.
Exactly. And
you're short-staffed in your school too, so.
Exactly. You know, I was just so frustrated.
Yeah.
And but yeah, today, I'm like, you've got to be.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what, I'm just going to ask you, I need to get a hold of our special ed supervisor. Our principal was out, and the guidance counselors were unsure, and I would think there'd be some sort of exception.
They would kick it to somebody, to a different bureau.
Yeah.
But, I mean, because individuals with disabilities, someone needs to be monitoring that. Because if there is no, there is an adult version of children use service, but if there is no, well, that would be a BHRS probably, but without them, then the only recourse you have is going to the police, and that's not what the police do.
Exactly.
You know? That's not their job. Yeah.
I know, it's so frustrating, but I just thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you know, your story here elicited flashbacks for me with our counties, same department, and there were 1 or 2 in there that we just prayed they would be the ones who answered. So just be like, oh, thank you. I want to send you a fruit basket for actually doing your job.
Yeah, and I call like even with my clients, you don't understand.
Oh, really?
Wow. Call and make sure, you know, like we're documenting everything, so if we don't miss something, it comes back to us. And like it's very stressful on us to make sure we have all the information that the student has told us. So it's not an easy phone call to make to begin with, and then for you to tell us, well, you know, let's worry about it. Exactly.
Smart play to call the child line as well.
Yeah, so we did, and hopefully.
Because they are then charged with following up the local counties to make sure. And that you've done what you are legally obligated to do. All we do is report. They do the investigation. If they decide not to investigate, that's. And also, you know, just to reiterate, I think what I said, or meant to say in the email exchange was, you know, you can't be held liable for making any claim that is unfounded. It's our responsibility to report.
Yeah.
You know, I just sat through our child abuse refresher yesterday training, Jerry Sandusky training, you know, yesterday as well. So these things are all kind of fresh on my mind.
No, thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Like, what do we do in this situation?
Yeah. Did you? fill out one of the forms. It's been so long since I was doing it, but there used to be a paper form where you write down where you saw, you know, on the body, and draw it. I assume they still use that same
What I always do is I always make sure our nurse documents are first. So the first off is that the child, and then we go to the guidance office. And then from there, and then I believe, I had to go back to the class, and we didn't call our school. They called him. And they were iffy about, David, the one with more food, like, do you know, do you need to,
I always say we don't investigate. We just report what kids tell us. And if a kid lied to us, I'm sorry that we wasted children this time, but, you know, and I'm sorry that we've got parents upset, but our obligation is to mandate, as mandated one time investigate. And you try to do all that while teaching all your kids.
You don't want to run around and like get shirt. I hate this shirt. Totally. Why do you want to make it? Go home naked. Like,
That's the least of our problems right now. Well, God bless you for being here. That's important too.
Sure. He's got his own thing. He's his own way of doing it. So, but it's great. I mean, I did enjoy it. I learned a lot.
But she's not getting any.
And the funny thing is,
That's her.
Peer edit. I have a note to myself. Looks good.
that's actually the only words in the whole.
Are you serious?
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, that's good.
All right. While we're still waiting, as a reminder, we are recording. Alicia is sick with the flu, so I'm recording.
He's like me. I'm not cold.
So anyhow, and then again, we're not yet starting, but if anybody has a peer edit or a paper or anything else they wanted to hand in, please let me know. No one's like jumping up the opportunity, so. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Briefing.
I guess my mother, I don't even understand. I don't send my love.
I'm GA right here.
I'm going to be able to.
At GA. It's insane. I'm GA.
I'm busy.
Like, how many students can I have in my classroom skills?
So that's
I used to do that.
That's
Well, actually, I usually a couple practices.
It does, and I'm really frustrated. Such are the numbers that I'm familiar with, which are still fuzzy, were from 10 years ago.
Okay.
But I remember us having rather large life skills classrooms at our high school when they were still in.
Is it actually
The ones that you
Wow. 2 weeks. A week and a half, I guess. Round around, so we're done. Hey, okay, what we got?
There's some shows.
Okay, let's go.
You're usually so successful.
Okay. I know how it was. Right now, my hypothesis is that doesn't really matter if it's someone in the class or someone else. All right, how are you? Oh, good. Good. So after how many painful days and hours?
We're still pretty young.
Okay. Matt, was yours someone from within class or outside of class? You're here at it. Okay. So class next.
But numbers are dropping.
Okay, thank you.
They have a whole bunch of people.
How are you, sir?
No, not really.
Good. So they're outside of class?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
A bunch of athletes in the school. Yeah. Whatever else. A motivation. Guys in the school that would really help us out, like offensively.
It's not very odd.
A bunch of athletes too. So. I came from a school that last year basketball was everything. So If it was basketball style, they were playing the other side.
I was freaking out.
All of which are seniors and NCAAs. If it has been, it's happening now. Not as big. Baseball bigger than
That's what I played.
Did we turn our stuff in already? Did I miss that?
If you want to, yeah, if you have anything to turn.
I mean,
on,
I'd like to
sure.
get a grade on it.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to get a grade on it, so I will.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, so it's optional, that would have made it a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. So this is the peer edit and the.
Yes, and then my articles in the back.
Cool. Okay.
It was just an article note this weekend, so.
Yeah.
Not very eco-friendly, but.
That's okay, I'm traveling the next 2 days, so having a few things in paper actually benefits me. I mean, I can still work things digitally, but every once in a while, it's a really painfully boring meeting, and I'm like,
You're welcome. Just think of me.
I have an executive board meeting for 3 hours tomorrow night.
Oh, yes.
I want to poke my eyeballs out, so this will give me something to do, as opposed to be completely off task and making fun of each other in meetings. Okay, all right, welcome everybody. I think we're missing, well, I know Alicia she emailed me earlier, she is not feeling well. I'm not sure, I don't know Nicole, I haven't heard from Nicole. And I feel like somebody else is missing. Help me.
Really, Dana went to print.
Oh, that was going to say, yeah, I did a count earlier and I didn't count to 21.
I think that's them running.
They're running. They're late.
I know, I ran.
So now Dr. Barker and his class are wondering why there's students running down the hall.
He's down the hall.
I don't know that my class or any class are running too busy now. All right. So, yes.
Somebody asked why we're being recorded tonight?
Yes. A good question. Yes, so I am recording because Alicia is sick, and I emailed her back and asked her if she wanted me to record class for her benefit. I didn't get a response back from her. I'm assuming that she's not feeling well, so she's not like waiting with bated breath to do email. So I just thought I'll err on the side of caution and record it. And then if she wants to access it, I put up the videos on a private YouTube channel. Really weird. Like when I used to say like private YouTube channel originally, I was like, that feels so uncomfortable saying that. But now anymore, I guess it's fairly common. I mean, at least that's how my parents see my kids grow and develop, is we record everything we put up on a private channel. And, so that's what we're using it for. And also, and fairly certain to mention this at the beginning of the semester, but if you have any reason to miss class, legitimate or otherwise, and you want me to record it, just shoot me an email, I'll record it. I throw it up on YouTube, it usually takes a couple of hours for the process, it's a big, huge whacker file. Usually by the next morning it's available and you can watch it, and if you send me a couple of comments that proves you actually watched it, like that was a really bad joke, or did you know you had a booger hanging out of your nose or whatever, then that proves to me you actually paid attention to and you watched it and you're good to go. So that's what that's for. Okay, housekeeping for the evening. We had a lot due tonight. And in fact, there's like a flurry of email activity in my in-basket. I didn't even go on D2L yet to know that there's lots of other stuff waiting for me. So now you guys can all breathe, at least in this class, because everything is largely done for a couple weeks. I don't know about your other classes, but for this class, you got a lot to do this evening, and so it's all over with, thank goodness, which now means I'm going to be very busy, and I don't expect you to feel bad for me on that regard. However, I do ask for your patience as I go through all of the projects, part 4, and the journal reviews. So I'm going to actually prioritize the projects to get feedback to all of the groups. Actually, before I leave for a 2-day trip across the state to get everybody their part 4 back. I think there's only 3 groups and I still need to do that for them. So I will get that back for those 3 remaining groups So that was Matt and Dale and Lori and Amara and Alexa, Dana, and Kayla, right? Or no, I'm sorry. Kaylee, yes. Haley, excuse me. I got last names here. I'm trying to say first name, and you're all confused. So those 3 groups, I will get you your feedback before I leave tomorrow. The other groups, you should have already received feedback from me. Some of you might have just gotten it like literally in the last half hour. But the reason I want to prioritize these is because I want you all to start, if you have not already, start implementing your intervention. If you start implementing it now, and then you think about when the paper is due, I believe December 1st or December 2nd, whatever that Tuesday is. So that means there's approximately 6 weeks between now and when the paper is due. So approximately 6 weeks to implement the intervention. Now, one of those weeks is Thanksgiving. So that kind of makes it difficult. Depending upon the nature of your participant, the behavior, and when you're observing, 6 weeks might only be 6 data points for some groups because they're only observing once a week. For other groups who are observing every day, they might have boatloads of data. So there's a wide range of how much data the groups will be gathering before the paper is due. But importantly, I want you to be able to start implementing as soon as possible, which is why I'm prioritizing these over the papers. So, happy implementing. Go forth and implement. I do ask, however, that you do this. Regularly chart your data and then respond to the data. I frequently get questions from groups saying, you know, how long should we wait until we change the schedule of reinforcement? And I say, I don't know. And the groups usually look at me like frustrated, like, why doesn't he have an answer? I'd love to just say 7 days or 36 hours or whatever, but I can't just make it up. No one can make it up. You really have to be responsive to the data. If your participant is making choices that are good choices, in other words, their behavior is improving because you've set up contingencies that are very appealing to them, then you might want to consider making it a little more challenging for the individual in terms of changing your schedule of reinforcement or your criterion for success each day or each session. So I can't really give a straight answer as to when should we change our intervention or should we change it at all. You really need to be responding to how the data are mapping on your graph. So I would strongly encourage that as your data are collected, that you're adding them to the chart or to your graph, and that on a regular basis, if you're collecting data daily, then maybe every 2 or 3 days. If you're collecting data weekly, then maybe once every other week. On some regular schedule, whatever makes the most sense for you and your team, on a regular basis, look at the graph and decide, do we need to change what we're doing or do we keep what we're doing exactly the same? Because I don't have the answer, at least globally, for anybody. I can certainly give you advice if you give me your data graph. So if you're in consultation with your group and you're wondering, should we change what we're doing? Should we bag it? Should we make it harder? Should we make it easier? What should we do? You can certainly ask me those questions, but I'm immediately going to ask you for your graph. And so really be responsive to the data as they're coming in. So start implementing as soon as possible. In those last 3 groups, I will give you your feedback before I leave tomorrow morning. Once I get that accomplished, then I'm going to shift my focus over to the journal reviews. I have reviewed a handful of them, but not all of them. So I ask for your patience. My goal is to finish all of them by next Tuesday's class. And as you can probably imagine, I have a little reward from a reinforcer for myself if I actually achieve that goal. Because I'm so weird, I do behavior management strategies on myself. So that is my goal. Bless you. But the reviews will go relatively silent over the next couple of days, and I'll pick them up toward the end of the week when I'm back in the office and over the weekend. So bless you. You're only allowed 3 in a class, so you'll get 1 more. Okay. So, any questions on that information? Alrighty. So, then we got to pick up where we left off rather abruptly last week when we were talking about techniques to decrease behavior. So, we're going to finish that up this evening. And then we're going to move on to differential reinforcement, which includes things like shaping and chaining and task analyses and all that good stuff, which, at least if history is any indication as to where you guys are all this year compared to previous semesters, I think some of that information is largely reviewed, so we will hopefully get through all of it this evening. But anyhow, so we're going to pick up where we left off last week and keep looking forward. I have a couple of, I guess, some activities a little bit later on. I see some of you have your true-false paper slips. If you do have them, 15,000 bonus points, and please get those out. If you don't have them, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. If you don't have them, no big deal. It's really not that terrible. It's not a big deal. I realized it was an activity that was intended to be just one night, but it got spread out over 2 nights. So that was poor design on my part. Okay, so I'm going to go back just a little bit. We started very briefly at the end of the last class talking about the first type of behavior reduction strategy that includes punishment procedures. So a level 3 is a form of punishment. And in particular, it's a negative punishment. So, what is the term that should go in this blank space? We did this last week, so Michaela, yes, decrease. So it results in a decrease in the behavior in the future, absolutely. So you know that a consequence, which is just any stimulus in the environment, that immediately follows a particular behavior. You know it's a punishment if it has the effect of decreasing that behavior in the future. If that stimulus doesn't decrease behavior in the future, is it a punishment? No. If it maintains or increases the behavior, what kind of a consequence is it? Right?
Reinforcer.
It's a reinforcer, absolutely. So our intent does not necessarily equate with reality all the time. Also, recall that any consequence, whether it's a punisher or a reinforcer, is actually a consequence for a behavior, not a person. When we reinforce or punish something, we are actually reinforcing or punishing a behavior, not a person. I sometimes may use imprecise language and say we're reinforcing the kid or reinforcing the adult, when in fact what is more technically precise is we're reinforcing the behavior, not the person. It's a little bit of a nuance that over time I've realized I probably haven't been real precise on that. Okay, so a negative punishment is the removal of some is something desirable, something that you want, which has the effect of decreasing that behavior in the future. So we have 2 different types. Response cost, which is what we ended up with last week, if I'm not mistaken, right? So response cost was you already have a whole bunch of reinforcers of some kind, and then you start taking them away. Don't look up here, your eyes are going to bug out. So I think we got it right here. So you start out with a certain amount of something, you start taking it away, whether it's money, or tokens, or letters in a vocabulary term in PE class, is that right? Laura, you shared, was it Laura, did you share another example? Somebody else shared an example very similar to that.
The computer time.
Computer time. Maybe, I don't know, or else I'm just making things up.
I remember that.
Lori's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, all right. So they start out with some reinforcers and you start taking them away depending upon their behavior. So you are punishing their behavior, not them. You are punishing their behavior. You're taking away reinforcers or reinforcement that they otherwise would have access to. Okay, so that's response cost, just as a refresher from last week. And I don't think we had any of these true-false statements from the response cost. Okay. Okay. So the next type of negative punishment procedure is timeout. So everybody is very familiar with the phrase timeout, and a lot of caregivers, parents and teachers included, think they do timeout correctly, when in fact oftentimes it's not done correctly. And that is because our concept of timeout is not necessarily truly what it actually should be. So timeout actually and technically means timeout from positive reinforcement. But that's a really long phrase, and that doesn't go over well in popular media or in parent guides. timeout from positive reinforcement. That sounds really too geeky, nerdy, technical. So we just shortened it to say timeout. But if you think of timeout as really timeout from positive reinforcement, that might help you understand what it should be as opposed to what it actually ends up being oftentimes when it's misapplied. So we have two different types of timeout from positive reinforcement. We'll get to those in just a moment. Let me just take a step back and just revisit this concept of timeout from positive reinforcement. So what that means is you don't have access to positive reinforcement that everybody else gets. That's what timeout truly means, is that because of your behavior, because of the individual's behavior, he or she is removed from an environment in which they otherwise would be receiving reinforcement. So they're in an environment in which you get lots of reinforcement. Yeah, gimme, 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 gimme. They get lots of reinforcement, they misbehave. Their behavior is punished by them being removed from the environment in which they typically would have gotten reinforcement. And so now, during their timeout time, they don't get any positive reinforcement. Therein lies where we oftentimes fail to implement appropriately timeout. When the individual is in timeout, they should not have access to any positive reinforcers. If they have access to any positive reinforcers, then you are not implementing timeout from positive reinforcement. So timeout is removal from an environment in which access to reinforcers is no longer available. So the classic example of timeout that is inappropriately used is this. A parent is attempting to discipline a child for misbehavior in the house, and the child gets sent to the child's bedroom. And in the child's bed, for timeout, you're going to timeout, go to your bedroom. And in the bedroom is a Kindle, is a computer, is a TV, and lots of toys. That kid, during timeout, is now playing with the Kindle, on the phone, talking with friends, playing with toys, doing whatever. That child, that individual, has access to lots of reinforcers. So while the parent was trying or attempting to put the child in timeout, the kid just left one environment and moved to another environment and had lots of reinforcers available. So therein is an example, a classic example of how timeout can be implemented or implemented incorrectly. Instead, if a parent wanted to use timeout from positive reinforcement, kid misbehaves, the kid should go into an environment such as what? What would that environment look like?
A chair in a corner.
A chair in a corner, okay?
Facing the corner.
Facing the corner, okay, all right. Can we live with that?
Non-stimulating.
Non-stimulating, unless the chair in the corner happened to be stimulating. But for most individuals, it is not stimulating, right? It's precisely, Jess. Yes, that's exactly what timeout from positive reinforcement in a home setting would look like. So, my wife and I, thankfully, haven't had to use timeout from positive reinforcement in a while, but when they were much younger, we did. And timeout from positive reinforcement with them was that I'll admit this. It's not like, Lori's not going to call children and youth services on me, was standing at the end of the hallway by the linen closet, which is not really reinforcing, and staring like this. That's how you do timeout from positive reinforcement. You do not allow the individual to have access to anything reinforcing. So the misapplication of timeout by sending the kid to the room, unless the room happens to be barren and just as exciting as the corner of a room or a hallway, is likely not timeout from positive reinforcement. So, that's the global conceptualization of timeout and also an illustration of how it can be frequently misused. So there are two types of timeout. There's non-exclusionary and exclusionary. The names should lend you to an understanding as to what they might be. Okay. So, yes, I'm sorry, Kim.
Okay, so you had a timeout, like you
Yeah.
timeout, and then after timeout, you said like you did a good job, while in timeout? Is that like? Is
So, well, yeah, so, okay, yeah, I mean, this is going to go a little bit later on, but this is how we would do it. We would explain as much as humanly possible in a calm, matter-of-fact voice, explain why timeout was being used, and we didn't say you're going to timeout with timeout from positive reinforcement. It was you're going to timeout. I was willing to truncate the language for my own kids. I know that's awful. So we would say, this is the behavior for which you are receiving timeout. Go to the other hallway and stand in the corner. We turn on a timer. This comes up a little bit later on, but since the question was asked, it's relevant here. The rule of thumb for how much time you should spend in timeout is 1 minute per chronological year of their age. And timeout from positive reinforcement actually has a diminishing return on investment once you achieve about 10 minutes. Maybe 15, but 10 to 15 minutes is about the max. So if you go above that, it's really not going to have the desired effect. Now, frankly, if you're using the rule of thumb of 1 minute per year of their age, then unless you're using timeout procedures with a 30-year-old, which you could, we call them, well, we try to call them prisons, but there's lots of reinforcers in prisons. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah, so you really want to go above 10 to 15 minutes. So if you got a 5-year-old kid, how long do you put that kid in timeout if warranted? 5 minutes. Yep. That's a general rule of thumb. So we would we'd start a timer, and to get back to your question, Kelly, we'd start a timer, and if they left the corner, the timer started over again, which was fun when they were first learning how to deal with timeout. Fun, I say that very facetiously. That was not fun. We had to coach the other kids to stay away from that hallway, or else they'd be like, yeah, and then that doesn't help. We would, at the conclusion of the timeout, then have, we do a little cognitive behavioral therapy with them, which is tough to do with like 3-year-old kids. They don't really have a whole lot of cognitions that are terribly helpful and meaningful in terms of helping the process, but you can. We talk about what they did, what they would do differently, and then move on from there. So we also use that, Kayla, as like a teachable moment. Okay, so when your sister steals your toy next time, what are you going to do differently instead of punch her in the head? Or as Sophie used to do, she used to bite her sister, her baby sister. She'd bite her. Like, we were really freaked out for a little while. She just bite her. I think it was right when we moved here. Yeah. So Sophie was 3, and Emma Jane was like, 3-month-old. And the baby would like, Emma Jane would cry, and Sophie would go and bite her. We're like, what are you doing? You can't do that. So, yeah, that was. Sophie would kill me if she knew. Granted, I've not reported it. Because that is not part of her history that she likes to admit. Anyhow, so does that help explain a little bit? Okay. So again, there are two broad types of timeout from positive reinforcement. And I've got some listed up here. So let me kind of define some of these. So you have non-exclusionary and exclusionary. Exclusionary means just what it sounds like. You're getting rid of them, like they are being removed from everybody. Non-exclusionary means they are still part of the group, they're still part of the environment, but you construct the environment in a way that they cannot access positive reinforcers. So, let me give you some examples of non-exclusionary timeout from positive reinforcements. The first TO, by the way, is not Terrell Owens. It's timeout from positive reinforcement. Takes a little bit, sorry. Okay, so environmental manipulation is where you do something with the environment that limits access to reinforcers. So, I don't know if this happens a whole lot anymore, although somebody a year or two ago said they remember this happening in their elementary school. In the cafe gymatorium during lunch when it gets really, really loud, there actually was a, Matt's not, do you know where I'm going with this, right? Or do you,
I was just at the school board meeting
where they were talking about
my school district where there was a huge fight about losing recess time if the lunch light went off so many times during lunch.
So, for those who aren't familiar with it, there actually is a product you can buy, schools can buy, anybody can buy it. It's a traffic light, red, yellow, green traffic light, and it's connected to an instrument that measures the decibel level of sound in a room. and the poor souls who are on lunch duty set the decibel levels to indicate what level, yellow or green, yellow or red. So if the room gets too loud, then the light turns from green to yellow, and that's a warning. I mean, everybody sees it, and if it's on yellow, then, ooh, we better be quiet. And if it gets too loud and moves up to red, then privileges are lost. So in one particular study that I had an opportunity to review, they took that traffic light and actually connected it to music. So music was playing, so when the light was on green, there was music playing. When it was on yellow, the music actually got a little bit softer. And when it was on red, the music shut off. So kids had access to reinforcement when it was on green. They could listen to music, they could chat with their friends, blah, 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 blah. When it turned to yellow, because it got a little too loud, the volume of the music decreased, so they couldn't hear it as well. And if the noise level in the room got so loud that the decibel reading caused the traffic light to turn red, then they had no access to music. So there is a form of environmental manipulation. It's non-exclusionary, it's not like you removed kids, but you just took away a reinforcer from them. So that's a type of non-exclusionary timeout. I don't think anybody reviewed, well, I haven't read all the articles yet, all the papers yet, but frequently people in this class review thumb-sucking behavior as a behavior of interest for their journals. And I don't remember if anybody did that in particular, but there are some studies that looked at thumb-sucking that's actually connected to the TV. No, the kid is not connected to the TV, but if the kid starts sucking the thumb, then the TV turns off. So it's another form of environmental manipulation and non-exclusionary timeout procedure. So those are just some examples of environmental manipulation. Another one is contingent observation. Again, a form of non-exclusionary timeout procedure. This happens a lot in classrooms in public schools. So in contingent observation, what happens is the kid misbehaves, so the teacher moves the kid to the back of the class. Or in some extreme situations, like the one I observed in the 4th grade classroom, and then I had almost freaked out. I wanted to freak out on the teacher because we didn't have permission to do this. We didn't have permission in advance to do this. The teacher put the kid in a refrigerator box, like cut out just the front, and then put it around the kid, and the kid sat, like, do you mind?
Not at all.
Summer's okay. So you put the box around Summer so that all she can see is me. She can't see anybody else. So that's contingent observation. She's still in the classroom. She's still receiving instruction. She just doesn't have access to any of her peer reinforcers. I literally saw a teacher do that. And I was like, what are you doing? Do you have parental permission? She's like, no, why do I need that? I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got a problem. So, an interesting idea, just not very well thought out in terms of getting prior permission to do that. And that actually is an issue that I mentioned on a different slide later on. If you're using any of these timeout procedures in public school settings, you absolutely should have parental permission and then knowledge of using them in advance. Because the last thing you want is for a kid to come home and say to mom or dad, hey, guess what I did? What happened to me? And I was sitting in a box all day. And you're like, what? That's not a phone call any principal or teacher wants to have. So that's contingent observation. Another version of contingent observation. This happened a lot in my middle school. Kid misbehaves. So the teacher sits the kid right out in the hallway. Now, in that particular middle school, each of the classrooms, like the doors were kind of inset. There was like a little foyer area from the hallway. So the kid would sit in the foyer area and still be able to participate in class, but was completely removed. That had limited success, because then, of course, if you're sitting in the doorway, you can see what's going on in the hallway, and it can be rather distracting. So it's another form of contingent observation. The one that everybody is wildly familiar with is exclusionary timeout, and that's where you have a separate room. And so, do I have more on that? Yeah, hang on. So, okay, let me talk a little bit more about exclusionary timeout. When you have a separate room, again, the separate room should be void of any reinforcers. Absolutely make sure that parents are, if you're in a school setting, that parents are well aware of this as an option in advance. So the only times that I've ever been in a school setting where we use exclusionary timeout is in emotional support classrooms. And so they have a separate room that was adjacent to the classroom. that actually was carpeted, not padded, but carpeted, and there was nothing else in the room. And there was a door that wouldn't lock. Don't lock doors with kids in them. And also the door had a window, so that when we closed the door, you could actually still see the kid, make sure the kid was safe. But with any of these, again, the length of time in timeout from positive reinforcement is noteworthy and should be contingent upon their age. So, okay. So your book mentions a couple of other ones. And maybe these are in your book, I can't remember. So sit and watch. Tell me, what kind of timeout is this? Sit and watch is where they sit away from their peers, but they still participate. Is that exclusionary or non-exclusionary? Mike?
Contingent exclusionary.
I'm sorry?
Contingent exclusionary.
It's non-exclusionary, and it is contingent observation. Okay? So it's not exclusionary because they're still in the classroom, they're still in the environment, but they are removed from the reinforcement of their peers. Your book talks a lot about this desired ribbon thing. Frankly, I've never been in a school where kids wear these ribbons and they lose the ribbon. I think that was something from like the 70s. I'm like, okay. In-school suspension, however, is a very, very common form of attempted timeout from reinforcement. If done well, actually, you can do it well, but that's a big if. So what kind of timeout from positive reinforcement? Is that exclusionary or is that non-exclusionary?
Exclusionary.
Chelsea?
Exclusionary.
Exclusionary, absolutely. What might be challenging with implementing in-school suspension in terms of truly adhering to the concept of timeout from positive reinforcement? Matt?
You have a ton of kids in school?
Yeah, if you have a ton of kids, although you can still do it, but how does that create additional challenge if you have tons of kids?
Because they can
They can socialize?
Yeah, stimulate
They can hang out, yeah. Absolutely. What other challenges might there be? Kayla, yes?
They want out of the classroom, that's why they're acting out.
Yeah. So if you see a kid is always in in-school suspension, guess what? That's not a punisher. What is that? Reinforcement. What kind of? Quick check, double check. What is that? What kind of reinforcement potentially is that? Negative. Why is it negative, Jess?
Because you are removing the classroom. Like, they
So
don't
the
want.
kid's behavior results in being removed, right? So the
Yeah.
behavior is resulting in a removal and it's increasing. So there is an undesirable. What's the undesirable thing?
The class.
The classroom for the
The
kid.
actual classroom.
Yep.
not the detention.
Okay, yes. All right, so the challenges within school suspension is if you have a lot of kids in there, for some kids it's absolutely not punishing at all. In fact, if anything, it's reinforcing for some kids. What other challenges might there be? Matt, yeah?
Could be that the adult running in school suspension is preferred adult.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, preferred adult.
That person.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that one. You just reminded me. So when I was in high school, this is going to date me a little bit. When I was in high school, my high school had a smoking lounge for students. Yeah. There was a smoking lounge for students. Only in the high school, not in the elementary school. High school, there was a smoking lounge for students. If one of your parents came into the main office and signed a form saying you could smoke in the smoking lounge, then you were allowed to go. You got a little pass. My parents did not allow me to do that, but some other people did. And so the school district employed an individual who was in charge of the smoking lounge. That'd be a tough gig. And also in school suspension. Now, I think one of the reasons maybe why he was hired was because he was a very successful lacrosse coach in a neighboring school district. And lacrosse is pretty big where I grew up. And I think the school district wanted him as their coach. So for some students, he was a very desirable adult in terms of getting his attention. In a very appropriate way. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate. And so for some kids that might have been I want to go hang out with Mr. Severino because he's like an awesome dude. And so that might be another reason why in-school suspension might be challenging. You're all wondering, how old am I that they had smoking lounges? Is anybody, I've yet to find anybody else who's actually had a high school who did the same thing. Of course, these days. But anyhow, okay, other challenges. Just Jay, yeah.
Depending on how structured it is, they could have access to desired stimuli.
Sure, yeah, they could have access to desired stimuli, whether it's people, as we already said, but just other things. You know, hey, I can avoid doing a lot of classwork. Absolutely. Tony?
They, depending on how it's structured again, that they might not have to do any work, they might just sit there and...
Yeah. So largely speaking, we try not to make in-school suspension a freebie-all. You know, like you do nothing all day, given assignments and do work. So there can be challenges with in-school suspension, but if designed and implemented properly, it can have a desired effect. For some students, but certainly not all, because again, as I think Kayla noted, for some that's going to be absolutely a reinforcer. Okay, so the last one is kids are engaging in social conversation, it's getting a little too rowdy, so the teacher turns off the lights. What kind of, is that exclusionary or non-exclusionary, first and foremost? Like, non-exclusionary, right, you're not removing them. What kind of non-exclusionary timeout is that? Tony?
Environmental manipulation.
Environmental manipulation, yeah, absolutely. Although, you know, sometimes you gotta wonder, if just turning off the lights, like you can still talk if the lights aren't on. But for some, that actually is, this was the environmental manipulation that my elementary school used during lunch. Turn off the lights and no one can talk. Yeah, Mike?
Well, the only way that works is if it's paired with something. The lights are paired with something.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So turning off the lights themselves are not going to...
Yeah, exactly. There has to be instruction about when the lights are off, no one's allowed to talk. And then you always have one or two kids that are still going to talk, and you got to figure out how do we teach them, reinforce them for actually adhering to the policy of lights turning off, just stop talking. Okay, so those are different types of timeout. Just some cautionary notes about exclusionary timeout. Make sure you're following your organization's policy. LEA stands for Local Educational Agency. Again, given my perspective and where many of you are or will be working in public schools, make sure you know what your public school policy is. However, I know others, maybe are working community settings or other organizations, understand what your policies are within that particular organization. We always make sure that when you're working with minors, that parents are well informed in advance of the possibility of exclusionary timeout. So almost every school district code of conduct mentions in-school and out-of-school suspensions as possibilities in terms of exclusionary practices, but I doubt that they make reference to any sort of timeout room. So in my former school district, every IEP meeting that we had for a kid who was going to be placed in the emotional support classroom, we, first of all, gave the parents a tour of the classroom, showed them the timeout room, and then wrote the timeout room in the IEP as one of our strategies, so that we were protecting ourselves as well as fully informing parents as to what was one of the many possibilities in timeout. The timeout room really truly was a method of last resort for those students. When you're using an exclusionary room, such as a timeout room, keep a log and monitor its use. Obviously, make every effort to implement and document that your less intrusive alternatives have been tried, but they failed to shape the behavior in the desired direction. And then again, there's that brevity piece, approximately 1 minute per year of age. So just some cautionary statements about exclusionary timeout, because I don't want you to run in here going, Rugby said you could put them in timeout for 30 minutes. No, yeah, Ben.
So the in-school suspension is exclusionary timeout.
Well, it is intended to be exclusionary timeout.
Okay, so if it's done well, that breaks that rule of, it breaks our time rule.
It does. It absolutely does. Absolutely does. Yeah, they're sitting there for 6.5 hours. Yep. You're absolutely right, but. Research, the mistranslation from research to practice, whether it's in schools, home settings, community settings, you name it, is pretty evident. And there's just one example. You know, when I was in high school, if I were in school suspension, that would absolutely have been a punisher for me, because that probably would have stopped my behavior. And I would like to believe that there are a fair number of kids for whom that would also be true. I would always get concerned as a school psychologist when I go to my high school and I get the daily attendance sheet and they list all the kids in in-school suspension, I'd see the same names over and over and over again. So that is not a punisher for them. That is a holiday for them. That is a reward, that is a reinforcer. I also get the struggles that administrators have in terms of meting out punishments for kids. especially for kids who have IEPs and that whole issue that we reviewed a number of weeks ago about how many days they can be suspended. But I would always try to work with my principals about, okay, I understand you got to address the negative behaviors, but we also need to focus on how are you reinforcing the positive behaviors? Because the kids that are constantly in in-school suspension need to be reinforced for their positive behaviors, and are we doing enough of that? I think if we all really stopped and thought about it, we can probably all honestly say, no, we weren't doing enough. So, you're right. Okay, any other questions about punishment procedures, and in particular removal punishers, which are negative punishers? Okay, then, okay, I don't have any of those true-false for this level. So the last level of the least restrictive alternative is presentation of aversives. In your own words, please describe for me, or for us, what does this hierarchy mean? Level 1, 2, 3, and 4. What does that mean? Mike's really good about raising his hand. I need more than just Mike raising, and Ben, and Tony, and Dale. All right, Matt, yeah, so what's the hierarchy mean in your own words?
It's like a continuum of, on one side or the top is things that are desired, and at the bottom are things that are disliked or undesirable things.
Okay. So these things are desired in terms of reinforcing or rewarding good behaviors, and these are trying to get rid of negative behaviors? Is that what you're trying to describe, or no? I misunderstood you.
No, I meant more about what you're actually receiving.
Okay. Oh, so the individual whose behavior is being changed?
Desirable, yeah, desirable and...
So up here, they're like happy, yay, everything's going great, right? Like they're excited.
They get candy.
Yep.
They start losing candy. They lose access to...
Here they don't get candy. Here they don't have access to candy. Here you give it to them and you take it away.
Yeah.
You're like, and you take it away, and then here they're like zapping, right? Okay. So from the individual whose behavior is being changed, from their perspective, this is much more pleasant. This is not pleasant. And kind of a continuum. Okay, good. Other thoughts? Mac? Thank you. Thank you for responding.
Each next level is only used if the previous does not work.
Each is only used if the level above it wasn't successful. And how do we know it wasn't successful? There's two things you got to consider when you evaluate whether it was successful. Michaela?
The behavior didn't decrease.
The behavior didn't decrease, absolutely. What's the other one? Chelsea?
We need
data to back it up. Yeah. Something else. You have data to back up that it wasn't successful, and some other data you also need. Yeah, Alexa.
Was it implemented correctly?
Yeah, bingo. There you go. Was it implemented correctly? So you need data to say it wasn't working, and you also need data to say we actually did it the way it was supposed to be done. If you answer in the affirmative to both of those, that it wasn't working and that yes, you did implement it, then you have every justification to move to a more restrictive, less desired approach. And I would also submit, not only is it less desirable as you move further down for the individual, it's also less desirable for the caregiver as well. I mean, nobody wants to do these things. You want to do these. Everybody's happier. Okay, so good. So that's that continuum of the least restrictive alternative. So the last and final method, and this is truly a method of last resort, is a presentation of aversive, otherwise known as positive punishment. By the way, so negative punishment is abbreviated SP with a minus sign, the minus valence. And then positive punishment is SP with a plus. Stands for stimulus, that's punishing, and it's negative. Stimulus, that's punishing, and it's positive. Now this is where I always stop and just remind everybody, the reason I prefer to use the term positive punishment is not because I think it's a great thing. I use the term positive because that was what it was originally described as, but because the positive nature implies that something is added to the environment, plus, added to the environment. So a positive punishment procedure means you're going to add something to the environment that is not liked. It's painful. It's noxious. It's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant. One of the most common forms of positive punishment is corporal punishment, spanking, hitting with a switch or a belt or a stick or whatever. As a reminder, that is not allowed in public schools in Pennsylvania. Yeah, Matt was like, because I know where Matt's head was going, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But it was legal in Pennsylvania up until 2005. And then thankfully, in my opinion, in 2005, Pennsylvania public schools came out of the dark ages and banned it. However, and this is going to be my soapbox for a brief moment, I apologize. But it is allowed in a fair number of states. Can't make that, wait a second. So it's a little bit old. So the Pennsylvania is now gray. This should now be gray. But the rest of the states, at least until, well, I guess this is a little bit, 2013, so it's a few years old. Here are the states in which corporal punishment is still allowed in public schools. I'm really against this in public schools, very much so. And I'll go on my opinion here, just I'm against it in all situations. But anyhow, in public schools it is still allowed in 19 states out of 50.
Wait, what are the white states?
What are the white states?
They were already banned?
Yeah, the white state, the gray or white states mean it was not allowed. So Pennsylvania now should be gray. Ohio and New Mexico were still, or they banned them since 2005, 2006. The gray, excuse me, the blue represents states that allow corporal punishment. They describe it as paddling. I don't know if they really distinguish between paddling and anything else, any other form of corporal punishment. But corporal punishment is a form of positive punishment. Okay, but fundamentally what positive punishment is presenting something aversive that results in stopping the behavior. Okay. Ooh. Okay. So, surprise every time I turn the slide. Okay, so you guys remember the term unconditioned and conditioned? So I'm going to give you on the next slide a whole bunch of stimuli. We have to decide if that stimuli is conditioned, meaning we have to be taught that it's a bad thing, or unconditioned, meaning no one has to teach you that it's a bad thing. You just know it because, well, your body tells you it's bad. So again, on the next slide, we're going to see a series of images, and you have to decide. I will count to 3, and on the count of 3, then you will tell me whether or not it is conditioned or unconditioned. All right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the first one. Cold temperatures, like what we've had the last few days. Is that conditioned or unconditioned? Think about it. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Correct. It is unconditioned. You just know it. Oh, there was supposed to be volume there, but it didn't work. Okay, getting hit on the head. Conditioned or unconditioned? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Unconditioned. Unconditioned, right? Get hit on the head. You don't have to be taught that that's probably a bad thing. That just hurts. How about this? The hairy eyeball. Is that conditioned or unconditioned? On 3. 1, 2, 3. Conditioned. We had a couple of unconditioned, one that was sideways. Okay, so we're not really sure. I would argue that it's conditioned. A lot of you said that. Why would you likewise argue that? Chelsea?
It might mean a different thing in a different culture.
Okay, so it might mean something different in a different culture. Okay. Other reasons, Mike?
Just like the turning off of the light, if it's not paired with something that they dislike, it just means nothing. You're just looking at them awkwardly.
Sure. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you're potentially, yes. Dale, yes.
I was going to say, put it another way, if it's not trained, then it could be ambiguous.
Yeah. Go up to a baby and go, baby's still looking at you going, You know, you have to pair it with something. I wouldn't recommend you go do that. People look at you really funny, like, what is he doing? So that's why I would, I think many others would classify that as a conditioned aversive. School is an aversive for some.
Yes.
Maybe even this class. Maybe I should put a picture of my class. How about that? So is that conditioned or unconditioned? Think about it, and on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. It is absolutely a conditioned aversive. If you question that, which I don't think anybody does, but if you question that, go through the first day, or maybe the first week in kindergarten. First day is usually pretty rocky because kids get a little anxious about separating from mom and dad, but kids love kindergarten. And then if you follow those same kids 13 years later, some of them absolutely hate school. They've learned to find school to be incredibly aversive. Electrical outlets. The outlet itself, is that conditioned or unconditioned aversive? The outlet itself is this. If I share that image with a kid, a little kid, is that an aversive, conditioned aversive or unconditioned aversive? Think about it on 3. 1, 2, 3. It is, in fact, conditioned, yes. Which is why there's a whole industry that makes those little plastic things that you stick in here when you have kids around so they don't zap themselves. Okay, so that is a conditioned aversive. Now the electricity itself is an unconditioned aversive. I hope we all would imagine. You don't have to learn that, that really hurts. Okay. Ooh, spraying someone with water in the face. Conditioned or unconditioned? Think about that, and on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're mixed on this one. What do we think? I want to hear justifications for what you think. Mike?
Well, there's not much difference between getting sprayed in the face by a squirt bottle or taking a shower. So,
okay.
Once again, it has to be paired with something that's aversive to cause the conditioning.
Okay. Other arguments? Taylor?
I don't think you have to, like, learn that you don't like to be sprayed in the face as a punishment. Like, you just don't like it.
Okay. Others? Dale?
I'm going to piggyback on that. The reactionary nature of something coming at you, that in itself is not designed.
Like an instinctual kind of reflex? Like, okay. All right. Ben?
Yeah, cats don't like it, and
and we're like 3 genes away from a cat, right?
Same thing. So I see the same thing in humans.
Okay.
But
yeah, I mean, I would tend to go with this being an unconditioned aversive, but I guess you could maybe debate that. Right?
But in the same aspect, we condition kids to enjoy getting splashed in the face with water.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm looking at it from both ways.
Sure.
Because teaching a child how to swim, you have to condition them again.
Absolutely. So, I have very vivid memories of trying to get Emma Jane accustomed to being splashed in the face. That was a painful experience, taking that swim class. So, yeah. So, I mean, I guess if there was a true, if I was grading this, I would lean much more in the direction of an unconditioned aversive, but I do see your point. I do see your point. Okay, no, we're not going to do that one. How about another kid in the school, or another colleague at work, or someone who lives in your development? On 3, 1, 2, 3. Condition. I go with condition. What we sideways? Both.
Yeah.
Okay. How so?
If you are a little kid, you see a big dude, big muscular dude.
Yeah.
It's not going to be. Oh yeah, I like that guy. So.
Okay. All right. I could buy that. I'd go more with the condition.
Yeah. Well.
But I mean, if they're big, huge, and scary looking, yeah.
And I see it from a sports aspect. You have freshmen going up against the senior, playing football or wrestling. Same thing. Of course, so there's no conditioning needed to say, all right, that guy's going to hurt me more than.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, did you have a comment or a question, or you had your hand up and then you put it back down?
Yeah.
You're okay?
I'm good. No, I mean, I was going to point out some of these things are desirable, but I think I'm trying to look at it as if it is an aversive.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
adversive.
So we first have to assume that all of these are aversive, and then based upon that assumption, is it conditioned or unconditioned? You're absolutely right. Yeah, we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there. Yeah, okay. So that's some scratch paper for you. You can throw it out or do whatever. Okay, so now that we understand kind of what these aversives are, and some of them are conditioned, some of them are unconditioned, then we talk about different types of presentation punishment that can be applied. First one, and this is actually relatively common in school settings, in community mental health settings, as well as just out in our general community. Restitutional overcorrection. If you break apart these two words, you might be able to get an understanding as to what it means. So restitutional meaning you have to restore something. And not only do you have to restore it, but you have to over-restore it. So in restitutional overcorrection, what happens is the individual, exhibits a behavior that damages the environment in some way. And the consequence of that behavior is to have them not only fix what they damaged, but also fix a bunch of other things in the environment that need to be fixed, but they weren't responsible for damaging. So the individual's behavior is punished with restitutional overcorrection by having them restore or overcorrect the environment, make the environment actually better than what it was when they originally defamed or degraded it. All right, before I get to the example, and we're wondering why do I have John urinating in the bathroom up there? Let me give you a simple. Yeah, okay, so here's one. A student, don't do this right now, please don't, because I guarantee you will be grossed out. But underneath your seat is probably at least 1 wad of chewing gum. Okay, don't, trust me, don't. First couple of times I discussed, I didn't pre-correct that, and people were like, really? Oh, so don't. If someone was caught sticking their chewing gum used underneath their desk, and I as teacher wanted to implement restitutional overcorrection, I would have them not only remove their piece of gum, but also have them remove all of the gum under every single desk. That's restitutional overcorrection. They correct what they did, but then they also correct what everybody else did that was similar. Another example, you catch someone spray painting graffiti on the side of a building. Restitutional overcorrection would be have them clean up that wall and then a bunch of other walls as well. So here's my story. Does that make sense? So here's my story with John in the bathroom. So John, I've mentioned John numerous times, was in the emotional support classroom. I knew John for 7 years, from kindergarten through 6th grade, worked with him every Friday. John had a predilection for well, let's just say testing me. And he was, at this point in time when this story is about to be told, as the story is being told, he was not allowed to go to the bathroom with anybody else. And so it was on my watch on a Friday afternoon, and we were playing a game, because that was his reinforcement for the week for engaging in good behavior, and he had to go to the bathroom, so I escorted him down to the bathroom, and this was a relatively new building, where the bathrooms for the boys and the girls didn't have doors. It was just like, and so I could hear, and so he went in, of course I let him go in by himself. He was a 6th grader, didn't need my help. And I was standing outside, and it was a very cavernous bathroom, big elementary school, and he was the only one in there, and everybody else was in their class. There's very little noise in the hallway whatsoever, and I can hear him going to the bathroom. And then it gets really loud, and much louder. What's going on? And I check in, and John is urinating all over the walls, all over the urinals, just everywhere. He's just standing, beep, beep, beep. John, as I mentioned, had some issues going to the bathroom with peers, with other, he just had challenges, and we tried all sorts of interventions up until that point. None of them had been terribly successful, which is why John was never allowed to go to the bathroom with anybody else. So we'd exhausted some of our previous interventions to try to get him to use the bathroom more appropriately. So John, urinating all over the walls, all over everything, I decided to institute restitutional overcorrection. So what would that have looked like? Matt, yeah?
Cleaning the entire bathroom.
Cleaning the entire bathroom. So we didn't play any more of SpongeBob SquarePants board game, which frankly was the worst game ever created. I was more than happy to have that be negatively reinforced. And instead, John had to clean not only that urinal, but the other 3 or 4 urinals and 2 stalls under my supervision. So that was restitution overcorrection to try to punish his behavior of urinating all over the place. Fixing what he had done and then cleaning everything else, which he was not terribly thrilled about.
Did that work?
Did it work? That was toward the end of the year in 6th grade. He didn't have a major issue like that in the bathroom. I would like to believe that it had a long-term lasting effect, but I honestly don't have any data to suggest that it did or did not once he hit middle school. Good question, though. Everybody's on it. Someone always asks that. I wish I would have followed up. Okay, so that's restitutional overcorrection. I believe that is one of your true-false statements.
Yes.
It is. Yes, it's number 7. I got to read one.
Number 6.
Is it? Oh, yes, thank you. It's number 6. So restitutional overcorrection is when you require someone to restore the environment to a state that is better than when that person degraded it in the first place. Is that a true statement or a false statement? It's a true statement. It is a true, accurate statement. So you have them, contingent upon exhibiting a negative behavior, restore the environment to a condition that is better than when they were first in it. Okay. So that's restitutional overcorrection. It's a positive punishment procedure. The second type of positive punishment procedure is positive practice overcorrection. So this occurs when an individual misbehaves or engages in inappropriate behavior. You have them practice the correct behavior over and over and over and over again. Hence the term practice overcorrection. You have them practice the positive or more appropriate behavior over and over and over again. So the classic example that I can recall from middle school, if you were caught running down the hallways, you had to stop, go back, and walk the hallway not just once, but 3 or 4 or 5 times. So you are practicing the correct behavior over and over and over again. So that's positive practice overcorrection. When a kid misspells a word, I had this with my own daughters this morning. They misspelled fire prevention. Odd spelling. It must be on fire prevention week. I don't know what's going on. So they had to practice the spelling of fire prevention, not over and over and over again, but 3 times. So positive practice overcorrection is actually desired in some ways because it is educative. It teaches an appropriate skill that would be used to replace the negative behavior. So it's an intervention strategy that has some instructional element to it. Yeah, Mike.
So just because it's used in an educational setting or it doesn't mean it's a punishment though, correct?
Well, it is a punishment because you're having,
we're using it.
My daughters don't want to sit there and write fire prevention 3 times over. They're going to go play on their Kindles. So, yeah.
Okay.
So you are punishing, you're having them do something additional in the environment that's not necessarily desired, but it is educative.
Okay. But you don't have, I don't know, maybe I think it just because you're not using it as punishment, you're using it as an educational tool. You're not.
Well, it still is punishment, but it is also an educative or an instructional tool as well, because you're having them practice the correct behavior. But it still is punishment because, let's be honest, nobody wants to write the word fire prevention 3 times over and over, 3 times or walk down the hallway 6 times. They just want to walk down it once. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. You sure?
Yeah.
Not convincing. All right. Dave.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a repetitive behavior to constitute overcorrection. The reason I ask is that, take for example an instance we use in the Army. If you give a packing list and go on a road march, 12 miles, you must carry the following items. Mm-hmm. You failed to carry 1 item, and you are told to repeat the march. Is that a positive practice of overcorrection? Because going over another 12 miles because you forgot a pair of socks, I'm not kidding, this happens.
Yeah, no. I would imagine that is probably more consistent with contingent exercise. I jumped ahead a little bit. So contingent exercise is you misbehave and you have to perform some sort of physical activity. No? No? Oh. Hot topic. Hot topic? Yeah. Okay. We're going to have a good conversation at the break after class. I'm gauging. Okay, so I think it's more like this. Misbehave, although in contingent exercise, technically speaking, the behavior that gets them in trouble isn't necessarily directly related to the exercise. Although missing packs, I guess forgetting to pack something is not necessarily directly related to how many miles you're supposed to march or run, right? So that probably is more in line with contingent exercise, I'm thinking. So I jumped ahead, so while we're here, contingent exercise. You display a negative behavior and the individual has some sort of physical activity that they must engage in. So if you hit someone, you got to do push-ups. You're tardy to PE class, you got to run laps. We skipped way ahead. I know, I'm going to go back, don't worry. But because this was brought up, because of Dale's question, I decided, why don't we jump ahead? We're going to go back, don't worry. So that is another form of punishment. Whereas in contingent exercise, the exercise really has no correspondence with the behavior per se. It's just exercise or physical activity for the sake of physical activity. We're going to have a chat, aren't we? Yeah, I'm liking it. It's good. Okay. I'm moving backward now. You okay with that? Thanks for keeping me in check. All right. Another form of punishment is negative practice. This is not educative or instructional at all. And as a result, you don't see too much research or literature on negative practice because it's frankly viewed as kind of mean from an ethical perspective. So negative practice is this. When they engage in the negative or inappropriate behavior, you have them do that negative or inappropriate behavior repeatedly. Bless you.
Or
I'm sorry?
themselves or just?
They just repeat it.
So
in other words, if you caught me swearing, if I said the F-bomb, and you say, okay, Rungi, go ahead and say it 10,000 times.
What about like physical aggression? Like if I would hit somebody,
You could.
do I hit them again?
I wouldn't recommend practice, but in theory, yes, you could.
What?
I wouldn't, again, you don't usually see that. That's sadistic and masochistic as well.
But it wouldn't be one of those things where, like, if I hit you, instead of like hitting you again, I would hit myself. Like, it doesn't go that way.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can never imagine an instance where we use negative practice for physical aggression. Like, I really am. If anybody can come up with a possible scenario, I'd welcome to hear what it is, but I can't think of anything.
Okay.
So again, let me just, I've got a bunch of hands raised on this one, okay? So we'll get to it in just a moment. So if I exhibit a negative behavior, you have me do it over and over and over again. Let me give you another one. Let me think about this. Okay. Well, I got some here. This is another one that I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, that one.
So you get caught smoking. You want to smoke so badly? Go ahead. Smoke the whole pack right now, right in front of me. That's negative practice. Then children and youth get called pretty much there afterward because the kid says, "My parents made me smoke 20 cigarettes last night." Really? And you're 7? Okay, we're calling children and youth. But that would be an example of negative practice. Actually, negative practice is helpful for some individuals who have motor tics, so the facial tic or some sort of other motoric tic that causes their muscles to spasm. Having them practice the tic over and over and over again in front of a mirror actually has some therapeutic effect. So that's probably the only instance in which I have read where negative practice can be helpful. Or if a kid or somebody is engaging in some sort of mildly annoying behavior, like tapping a pencil, you could take the pencil away. That would be a lot more obvious and much more helpful. But if you wanted to do negative practice, you could say, okay, I want you to do this now for 15 minutes. You can't stop. If you try to stop, I'm going to make it longer. So the theory behind why negative practice works is that the individual is engaging in the inappropriate behavior for some sort of attention or sensory stimulation or to gain access to something. And so as a result, if you have them do it over and over and over again, they will eventually become satiated on it. They won't really find any value in it whatsoever. So if you tell me to say the F-bomb 28 times, after all, they're like, okay, it really has no like shock value anymore. Or I want to smoke a cigarette, but now you're making me smoke 20? Geez, that's a lot. It has no value anymore for me. So we had some hands raised. Mike.
So say you have a student that is physically aggressive towards another person.
Yep.
What, say you put in, instead of punching a student, or you put in a punching bag, and you still have them punch the punching bag, what would that be considered then?
I would consider that negative practice. In fact, if you really, like, if that physical activity was actually a benefit to the person, and that, like, say for an sport, you know, for conditioning or strength or whatever, then I would actually consider that to be either reinforcement, if they really are trying to increase their strength or their, you know, it had some sort of physical benefit, or I would say it would also be some sort of positive practice over correction, where they're practicing a more appropriate behavior when they're upset, and they're practicing it repeatedly. So if I understand
it's because it's the same behavior. I don't know, just because it's the same behavior, it's still punching.
Yeah, but it's not punching a human being. Okay. And I think we all would agree that punching a punching bag is far more appropriate than punching a human being in virtually every circumstance, unless your life is in danger, of course. So I could see where having them punch a punching bag or punch a pillow or whatever would be far more appropriate than punching an individual. So I'll consider that to be some sort of positive practice over correction. So it still is punishment because they're doing something a lot, but at least it's something more positive in nature. Okay, Matt, that's pretty emphatic about his arm. Yeah, okay.
Typically with anger management, though,
Yeah.
you don't want them doing those punching behaviors because then they just get better
Thank
at
you.
punching.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the earlier stages, they're just kind of wailing on that pillow or punching bag and not really making contact. But if they're a really aggressive person and you're giving them that punching bag or that pillow,
Sure.
their eye-hand coordination improves and then they become better.
They're more effective at punching someone the next time. So there are other strategies that we might want to try first. Before that, yeah, absolutely, and some de-escalation techniques, and count to 10, count to 100, count to 1,000, whatever you need to do. So yes, thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. So, but I wanted to kind of use an example of, instead of punching somebody, let's punch something inanimate that's not going to fight back or be injured as a possible solution. Although you're absolutely right, we want to try some other techniques first. Tony.
I was just going to answer this one.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Sorry, I didn't completely shift.
Because I'll stop. You are awesome. Thank you for saving me right now. Yeah. Yeah. So okay.
When I was an undergraduate and I was learning to play any instrument.
Yeah.
If there was like a passage or something you had difficulty with, if you got it right, you had to play it over and over and over again at least 5 times.
If you got it right,
if you got it right once, but you had problems with it previously, you had to continuously play it over and over again.
Okay, so just practice over and over.
Yeah,
over
that
again.
small phrase.
Okay. Okay.
So that'd be
all right. Matt.
This might be a stretch.
Sure, go for it.
I'm trying to think right in my head. The movie Matilda.
Okay, you lost me already. Sorry.
If I remember the movie correctly, the Trunchbull makes Bruce eat an entire chocolate cake because he had already eaten too much cake.
That is the best scene.
I have to admit, I'm known for more of the movie. It sounds like it was a good one, according to Jess's rating. So he eats too much cake.
So he gets in trouble. He gets in trouble for eating too much cake at lunch or something.
He principal's cake.
He ate the principal's cake, and so he is forced to sit in an auditorium in front of the entire school and eat a large chocolate cake.
Well, we're not really in the game of public humiliation, but okay. Yeah. So would that be positive practice over correction?
I mean,
what do we think?
Wouldn't that be negative practice?
Yeah, I would say that'd be negative practice because I don't know that we want anyone to eat an out of supply of cake. unless they're at some weird county fair. Pie eating contest. Does that make sense? I forgive me for not knowing the movie.
No,
I mean, you did a good
okay.
job of describing it. I'm trying to kind of think it out loud. I'm going to move off this because yeah. Mike, that's you.
Looking at it from an athletics
Yeah,
standpoint, any type of practice where, you know, I'll just take football for instance here. You run a play and you run it incorrectly. Well, we're going to run that play no matter what.
Yeah.
Several times throughout practice throughout the week.
Yeah. So that's this.
Even if we do get it right, we're still going to run it again and again.
Absolutely.
And again, so.
Yeah. So that's I'm not saying there's anything necessarily bad with these things, especially this one. I mean,
correct.
Positive practice over correction is extremely educated.
Well, you asked for examples.
Oh yeah. No, I thought you were saying.
No.
You're saying. I think you were trying to defend these things.
No.
I just admitted that I used this with my kids this morning on spelling, and I don't think I'm all that terribly horrible as a parent. Maybe that's for my kids to judge, but it's good for you to judge, I guess, as well. But yeah, so there are lots of examples, and so that is extremely educative. And likewise, if they perform that play correctly in a game, they get lots of reinforcement, don't they? Hopefully they get reinforced on the field because it's been successful in either defending, if you're on defense, or gaining yardage or scoring a touchdown or whatever. You also get lots of reinforcements from your teammates, from your coaches. There's lots of reinforcers, but during practice, that overcorrection is absolutely necessary to basically overlearn.
And that would be positive overcorrection.
Absolutely, yeah. You're teaching it over and over and over. Yep, absolutely. Matt, did you have a question? Or
yeah, negative practice is like aversion therapy.
Aversion therapy. Well, I have an idea as to what aversion therapy means, Matt. What do you mean by? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Well, I mean, like, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but anything that you want the person to become, to not enjoy, you just have them do a lot of it. But it's the same thing as smoking. If they smoke one.
So I'm gonna admit probably something I shouldn't. So one of my all-time favorite movies is A Clockwork Orange, which is really twisted. Not a family-friendly movie. And in one of those scenes, they're using negative practice with him to become an attempt to try to desensitize him to violence. So they strap him in a chair and they keep his eyelids completely open while he watches videos of the Holocaust and just all sorts of atrocities, and they keep him awake the whole time, so he has to watch this. That is an example of negative practice. Yes, they were trying to create an aversion in him so that he would no longer engage in violent or aggressive behaviors. And, well, you have to see the movie if you want to see how that works out. Don't watch it around like your parents or your kids. Don't admit in public that you watch it like I just did. The movie was banned in the United Kingdom because it was too violent. Like,
one last thing, I promise.
No, you're fine.
So, another educational terms. Checking for understanding. Would that be considered positive overcorrection?
No, that's just
because you've already noticed.
You've taught it.
They've learned it, and then checking for understanding, you check it again.
I kind of consider check for understanding to make sure that everybody's getting it, because like right now I teach everything, but I don't know if people are actually getting it unless I check to make sure that you got it.
Correct, but the children or the students that do understand it, that would be a positive.
So if I sat here for the next 30 minutes and had you guys do this, first of all, you'd kill me. You probably have every right to. But that would be positive practice over correction, because I am asking you to do something that frankly you find annoying now because you've already learned it, and I'm asking you to do it over and over and over again. So it becomes aversive for you. The activity is aversive, but it is overcorrection, and then I'm making sure that this is like seared into your brain. Make sense? So I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
Ben.
All right, so in the application of it, in positive practice over correction, this is a form of punishment that I apparently jump to every day.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And that's okay. So this is like an exception to the rule. I'm allowed to go right towards...
I would imagine that if you actually sit back and think about it, you probably haven't just jumped right to this.
So, for instance, spelling. Let's say I'm teaching spelling.
Yeah.
I'm going to go right to... I mean, this is a very, very common form of punishment.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, because let me use me an example, because I don't want you to put yourself out there, and apparently I freely do that all the time. So in my own kids in spelling, so they go on the iPad every morning after breakfast and they practice their spelling. And as long as once they have successfully spelled all of their words and corrected any errors they've made, then they can go play on their Kindles or play with whatever they play with in their rooms. But until if they misspell any words, they have to write them 3 times. Once they've written them 3 times, then they can go engage in their activity. So I would like to believe that I have offered reinforcement for them for the correct behavior. And when they do happen to spell those words correctly, like today, they didn't get fire prevention, but tomorrow perhaps they will, I hope. So I think Sophie has learned that apparently in this week's spelling lesson, fire prevention is capitalized. Not really sure why it's capitalized, but it is. So that's why she got it wrong on the spelling test. So she will receive reinforcement moving forward. So there are other things that I have put into place, whether on purpose or inadvertently, that have attempted to reinforce her for doing the right behavior, in this case, spelling these words correctly. When she fails to achieve that behavior or exhibit that behavior, then that's where the punishment practice over correction comes in. So I think if you were to critically evaluate what you do as a teacher, you probably have a lot of reinforcement that leads up to the instance in which you have used positive practice over correction. Where this would be problematic is if the kid never spelled a word correctly and all you did was this. That would be problematic. But I would hope and I would imagine that most kids have success in spelling some words. So,
yeah, that makes
you okay
sense.
with that?
Yep.
I don't want you to walk out and go, I'm a terrible teacher, I'm awful. No, put that on me. I'm the awful one. Okay? All right. So, kind of last concluding thoughts about punishment procedures, then we'll take a break. As a reminder, given our hierarchy, punishment procedures, whether they're negative or positive, are methods of last resort. That fair pair concept still applies. If you're punishing one behavior, make sure that you're reinforcing replacement behavior. Otherwise, you've potentially created a behavioral vacuum or void in which another inappropriate behavior takes its place. In kind of extreme circumstances, you want to consider conducting a functional behavioral assessment. If your punishment-based procedures are still not working, then you need to go back to the drawing board and really get some more data to help us understand what is the nature and root of this problem so that we can address it more effectively moving forward. When using punishment-based procedures, give a warning first. Try to remain as calm as possible, which is easier said than done. I can write it in a bullet right here, and then I can go home and do the exact opposite. It is terribly challenging to try to remain calm, cool, and collected, but do that. When using within school settings, make sure that you're using punishment-based strategies when parents have already granted permission to do so. So in school, out-of-school suspensions are typically already in the code of conduct, so you're okay there. But if you're using any of these other ones, you got to have them in there. And then just monitor, meaning monitor the efficacy of what you're doing. If I was in the bathroom every Friday cleaning stalls with John, that's not punishment anymore. He's actually getting reinforced for it. So use data to monitor whether or not it's actually having the punishing value on that behavior. Just some general kind of concerns about punishment. Largely speaking, some forms of punishment are viewed as negative models, especially when it comes to corporal punishment. So I personally always found it very contradictory when we say to an individual, I am hitting you because you hit somebody else. That doesn't make any sense in my head. Because you hit somebody, I'm going to hit you. There was a logic there. Matt, yeah.
Wasn't that part of the issue with some of the Scared Straight programs?
Yeah.
For the kids that were going there, they realized, oh, I'm not bad enough, so I got to get bigger.
Worse,
better,
yeah,
so that
yeah.
When I go to jail, that I can handle myself better.
Yep. And I will admit also there's a large contingent of behaviors who really much are very much opposed to a lot of these behavior practices, punishment practices. And I think a lot of that is rooted in the absolute mistreatment of individuals with disabilities in the 60s, well, up until about the 80s. And then we realized, we probably shouldn't be doing that with anybody, let alone people with disabilities. So yeah, I think going back to your comment, Matt, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Another problem with punishment is that our emotions can cloud our judgment, not only during but also after. we mete out some form of punishment, and that should not influence our decision-making. And then also, a final one is that sometimes punishment-based approaches can actually result in the individual learning how to escape or avoid situations, and that's a bad thing. So you get the whole concept of like learned helplessness and avoidance and withdrawal from basically any environment because the individual has repeatedly been punished, and so they just figure, you know what, school is so punishing or this classroom is so punishing that I'm going to just do whatever I can to avoid it, and that's problematic. So those are just a few other kind of last-minute thoughts or conclusions about punishment-based procedures. Any questions or comments? All right, then let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at a case study in small groups. So we'll take a break for about 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll start up again. The exercises you guys in PE class and athletics are not part of your education.
No, now, basic exercise. Now, like the ones you put up, coming late to class, punishing them by running more. Okay.
Yeah.
That is counterintuitive. That's completely counterintuitive because we're trying not to make exercise a punishment.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's,
and I put that up there because those are my experiences when I was in high school.
Okay.
You showed up late to class for PE, you ran an extra lap. Or like, what was the one? Because we had a swimming pool. I guess they do it in Indiana too, right?
no, they have a pool at the middle school.
That's right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But like, if you were late, they gave you extra time to change, which is, obviously understandable. But if you were beyond a certain point in time, after the start of the class and you weren't out there, then you had to swim extra laps.
Now, see, if it's not extra, I have no problem with their late. They make up whatever they missed. That's not, but having them to do more, once again, that's counterintuitive. It's completely counterintuitive to the whole activity movement, which we're trying to combat. Childhood obesity.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think probably my examples need to be, first of all, need to be updated. Well, I can't change my experiences.
Well, I mean, that's what it is.
But you're absolutely right. I'm glad to hear that that's not utilized as much, if at all.
The pedagogical structures now are to get away from that. To completely get away from that. That's not saying, well, we still have the roll the ball out and sit on our keisters.
Absolutely. It's not saying that everybody in my profession does what best practice is. I firmly get that. One of my favorite T-shirts that I saw a number of years ago here on campus was, and I'm going to get it wrong, I'm not going to say it verbatim, but it was essentially, someone who was, either they were a tractor prospector or something. The T-shirt saying,
great? No,
think about this. Your punishment is my sport. And I thought that's beautiful. That's beautiful because for some people, that's exactly what they want to do and they excel at it. So my examples of here were merely just intended to be my personal experiences, but a recognition, and I'm glad you brought this to my attention, like the I have a hard time saying that. Pedagogically, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I was like 20.
It is, there's a movement away from it. So,
that's where,
the
thing,
I would have to rate 20.
well, let's go towards elementary. The thing that it's geared towards contingent observation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, once again, contingent observation, they're not moving.
They're not physically active.
Correct. So it's really reinforcement based.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you come. Thank you for showing class on time with your stuff. For my sneakers, because I was still in elementary school. But yeah, like if they wear their boots and they don't have their sneakers, I'm not sure actually what happened. I'm sure they probably wanted to snow shoes or snow boots.
Well, and then, the punishment there is, especially middle school, high school, is grade punishment. But it's not punishment.
Yeah, well, for some it would be. I mean, for some,
let's say some, but others, I'm going to wear my boots today, so I don't have to do anything today. So it's not between a rock and a hard place because it's not safe to be wearing.
It's funny you mention it because so one of my closest friends was salutatorian, and the only reason he was salutatorian is because he didn't dress for gym class a couple of times, that brought some grade down. And to this day, he's incredibly bitter about that. But that's, I mean, so for him, you know, bringing his shoes or whatever he had to wear for gym was highly motivating. He's got grades up, but you're actually right. Some kids, like, I'm thinking of one student, one of my peers in particular, who remained nameless.
Is there an all-service desk?
Frequently didn't bring clothes, and I suspect that she did it on purpose. Because unfortunately, we all know.
Well, and part of it is, you know, that's another reason why the movement away from sport education, where it's all about athletes.
Yeah, I just know that's good. That's good. Yeah, because I remember we used to like doing hockey and basketball.
And there's always
yeah.
Because yes, we need everybody. We're not trying to exclude.
Yeah. So that's pretty neat. That's very much a
and that's been within the past 10 years. It's really starting to shift, and it's more being accepted at the collegiate level and technological.
Yeah,
the same way.
So I'm sure there's more than just one primary motivating force behind it, but is one of the primary forces just, you know, our confidence?
Well, yes, for sure. How many people 2000 or 2010 really put it into motion? And we need to.
And help me on this one. I've heard, I've never been able to find anything like that. He is still federal. This is correct, or am I?
We're trying to make it so that it.
You know what? So then I just had PE teachers at my high school where I was really good at convincing all the same.
I mean, but it's changing the other way. That they're not mandated. It was originally. Okay. They're changing away. More and more states are saying, all right, we don't need, or we don't need a certified health and safety educator in the elementary school. Any teacher can. If all they have to do is take a class in the college, 3-credit course, and they're good to go.
So the classroom teachers, and it was just blew my mind that you could still do that.
And you know, it's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is.
But then because money was also there, they were out there. Well, but money, I mean, pay someone enough to come out there. They'll teach you how to PE.
Right. But that's the thing, they don't want to spend it. They don't want to spend the money.
So I guess, so you're saying the law is absolutely removed.
Correct. And we're
aiming at 10 years ago, my recollection was not that we were because the context that I'm thinking of was, you know, we be considered a student from school for a period of time, and we go to the special department of applied special teachers are required that and we had to physical activity and health. So I kind of lumped that. And so we have to provide those services as well, but you know, that wasn't our initial thought. That's like we got to get special education. The health and phys ed teachers like, wait a minute, don't forget us. Like, oh yeah, absolutely. And it just, you might be right on the line. And they were arguing that it was mandated. Perhaps it was.
That's the whole thing about these. How are they? Oh, they're recording. Yeah, they're being required.
I just see him getting weird. He's an adolescent, so he's getting weird for other reasons.
And I went through, and I went through, and I thought I got it.
Because he didn't say, you know, mom and dad sign. 30 minutes ago. Yeah, well then you can monitor it a little bit. Yeah, because I've got like, you know, there's ways to craft the academic, since it was monitoring. It helps just to some extent.
I'm glad you noticed that.
look up the number. There was 5.
Are any of you going? Yeah, all of you. 1 day, 2 days. I mean, the rest is 1 day, just tomorrow. Going up tomorrow morning, and then staying overnight or coming back. They would tell you about the different. You definitely should go. You can make a small or even a large meal out of it if you wanted to. You can't. I mean, you know, depending on your dietary habits. You can eat meat and vegetables and a lot of the cheeses, and then you might be able to make dinner out of it. Make sure you go. I'm sorry? Yeah. They also have master raffles. You buy, you know, like raffle tickets, I don't know, it's like $5 for an arm, something like $10 for.
I'll try my best.
You guys do any of that stuff? A few years ago, they were asking where like iPads or. Although I did get to do some. I was listening. There's a microbrewery that's about to open here in Louisiana, but they're not open. I was hoping they would be open. I want to get local stuff.
What did you get?
So I got last year. Actually, bottles of wine. They're not actually from even anywhere near here. They're from Erie. That's because there's local wineries around here.
We can do it.
I'll admit it. I just don't want to go forward. Yeah, I'm just looking at it right now. No, I don't want to mess your uniform apart.
No, there's room. It's stripped in the back. So yeah, we have room.
So I'll put them around. But I got some bottles.
The only thing you did.
Did you get sweet wine?
I got, yeah, I did.
Do the double space thing?
I tried to play the audience, usually the audience.
You won't continue to do it.
They're Pennsylvania wines too. Pennsylvania wines tend to be,
There was one time,
in my opinion, extremely sweet.
but I'm a redneck, but he also, I like to go through like, it's not like you said, they're stupid wrong, but it's like, you know.
Yes. So do you know where the Art Food is? Used to be the Holiday Inn? Okay, so you go out Wayne Avenue, like over 10 years ago. The Radisson, parked in by Radisson. No. So you're going on Wayne Avenue. And what is out there? They have Oxygen. I'm sorry? The VFW is kind of out in that general direction, yeah. It's 119, so Wayne Avenue, 119 South. As you kind of leaving town toward Blairsville, there used to be a window manufacturer called Corral. It is now vacant. But part of that has been partitioned off, and there's a brewery called Levity that is in the final stages of opening up business. They had their beer available. I don't know if it's available in bars, but a couple weeks ago they had that Napoli and Full Festival thing. My wife and her friend I was really good. But apparently it's pretty good. So they're opening up. They're going to right there. That's not familiar. Look at so that's the only one I'm familiar with. And there's a couple of others that are much earlier on in the process. But that one is like the website says open super.
The park-in is turning into
No, across the street. Right across Wayne Avenue. No, the parking lot. Yeah. So right across the street, it's like this old industrial looking building. And I think the set, but it's just one little small part of this thing. I don't know if their signage is real obvious, unless you go down the turn, it's down like Silver Spine.
I mean, I'm here going through it. I pass it every day.
Okay, so
Another one of those little climb.
What I want to do kind of as a culminating activity to talk about decreasing negative or inappropriate behaviors is have you engage in a thoughtful conversation, brainstorming, action planning with peers. So I've got two different case studies. One is a case study of Susie, who has an 8-year-old with autism, and she frequently hums and slaps her ears. And when she does this, she's placed in exclusionary timeout. The other one is Anthony, sorry Tony, who is an 8th grade student who frequently makes rude or silly remarks during the teacher's lessons. Sounds nothing like our colleague Tony here. The teacher's typical response to his behavior is to reprimand him. And sometimes they occasionally kick him out of class. So what I'd like you to do is just work in groups of 2, 3, or 4. I'm not going to sit here and monitor exactly how many. Just don't work in a group of 18. They're really problematic. And I want there are 3 prompting questions that I want you to kind of think about, contemplate, and have one team member write down your responses and list all of your names. This is my permanent product evidence who showed up to class tonight. And that team member who is writing down people's names and your reflections is going to submit that at the conclusion of this whole activity. I'll probably give you maybe 10, 12 minutes, 38 seconds, something around that. So, because I am just frankly too lazy, I'll include this half of the room can be green. You can have Susie, and this half of the room, you guys can be pink and be Anthony. You don't have to all work in one massive group. So again, just divide up amongst yourselves and reflect upon 3 prompting questions after you've read the short vignettes. Okay, go for it. We have enough? Everybody good?
So who wants to be first? Who wants to be first?
He didn't say group of 9 was okay.
I'm very uncomfortable.
You want to jump in?
I thought your edit was good.
I know why I don't like it. But I write all caps. Ever since I started teaching, I write all caps. It's easier for me to teach. I cannot do that. I do like writing. Yeah, it's not as fast, but it makes me write more concise. It's really fast. Right, that's fine. Really fast. Susie is an 8-year-old with autism. She's really mad at class when she does this. After 3 weeks of using this procedure, behaviors have not decreased.
Obviously, the first one, the behavior has not decreased.
Yes, the behavior has been maintained.
Yeah, that's why I said
I'm assuming, I was going to say, Dr. Runge.
Yes.
Are we assuming that the exclusionary time has been performed?
Yes, yeah, make that assumption that it was implemented as designed. Yes. Good question, Tony.
like, thank you for not talking about it. You could do the other thing. I think.
We assume Are we assuming this was just because I mean, yeah, that's what I was just saying.
I don't think we have to use.
Yeah. Do like a
Oh, I could probably punish the reason I say no slapping these ears.
That's really weird. First of all, exclusionary timeout. I mean, in relation to disturbing the class, I can continue the rest of the class, I can see
Yeah, I think that's I've met some really good
It's accommodating.
Oh, they're still, oh yeah, they're out. They're still out.
Alright, so something with positive behavior, same function.
Now,
Alternative.
what was there is one where you're replacing a behavior that cannot be done at the same time.
Behavior.
So that's like.
Yeah. So yeah, so we're talking about differential reinforcement of
Okay, so in doing that then, how would we, what would be the incompatible thing for humming?
well, that's
I don't know where the humming.
slapping it. The physical abuse is definitely.
Well, yeah.
Right. So
I would wait, I mean, that's something that we think of.
They're useful for disruptive classroom behavior.
We want to take
But
that.
alternative behavior.
Was it now saying?
Who are you? Are you a teacher in the class or are you just one-on-one with the kids? Because if you're one-on-one, you can
I'm
do a
assuming
lot.
the teacher,
I'm
because
gonna guess this is classroom. You're a core classroom teacher.
I'm sorry?
What goals?
We're looking at this from the point of view of a classroom teacher.
Yes.
What is it for your office? So positive reinforcement is
So you reinforce something that
So if I need to do anything in the class area.
Stressful.
Oh, that's a long time.
That could be a whole.
yeah, and I think that, because I think part of this is, the basic, like, as long as they aren't asleep, then it's.
And for humming, you gum too.
Right, good.
So it's a whole new caveat.
Yeah.
No, I know, yeah, absolutely.
Well.
So wait, if
Now they're projecting out.
How do you spell
Are you getting all this?
He looked at mine, he was like, clearly not. Clearly not the guy right. Those letters. Yeah, you're getting all those, oh, no.
Of course, we could even say like, wait, I'm gonna after the lessons. Are you serious? I don't know, just not right. That's
Alright, so how do you reinforce?
Or like raise his hand.
Do you want a full?
No, just enough, because I'm gonna have you switch with the other groups and just.
So you can say, we're reinforcing things.
Yeah, like you have to go real in depth. Like breathe.
Momentary
Yeah, like
contact.
raise
You don't have to worry. What's your
Make sure we have.
just even like the.
Squeezing stress ball.
Okay. What is the rationale for considering having to go on? Why is it? Guys, what's the rationale?
You're all good, you're rock and roll.
Instead of
self-stimulation.
We're assuming that's what it is. I mean, it could be.
It could, I mean, either way.
It could just be.
Eventually it's gonna, well, eventually it's going to.
So maybe, well, I mean, we're assuming it's self-stimulation.
Well, you're right.
Based on the.
Well, either way, it's self-stimulation. Either way.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, just take all the lights off the table.
Okay.
I mean, I'm okay with that. You can still hum and chew.
Yes, I agree with that. But also, if there's no gun policy,
That was my second, Now I understand.
I can understand reinforcing something, but if you're reinforcing something that, oh, well, he gets to chew gum, he's gonna start humming, so I get to chew gum.
More this.
Well, it's not just fun, but it's experiment itself, and I don't know if it's actually
One more time, you're good, you're done? Okay.
I learned something similar, but it's really on your brain.
Well, it reacts with your brain, so that's,
You guys good?
we're getting there.
Yeah, how much more time you need?
You know what?
4 minutes. Okay. And 26 seconds.
All right, 3 minutes and 38 seconds from now. We're
So rationale that we're starting with a.
Keep saying 38 seconds, like for physical.
There's no significant.
Which is the most helpful?
The kids' face, what it would look like.
I think that's
Putting that up above.
I think that's be served down here.
That's what I was saying. As long as we address the, we know the issue.
Changing a tire is wrench and putting air in your tires.
It does, it has like a refreshing look to it. It takes a while though.
Well, my problem is everything turns into print person, and everything just melts into itself. So that's why it's just easier for me to write because even the kids ask me, why is everything in all caps? The annoying part is when you get acronyms, because then I have to.
When I was teaching out of I had to use the smart board and run it all across and writing physically on it as much as possible because every time I did, the kids were like, wait a minute, what was that word? What are you trying to say? There's a wires? I'm sorry.
Did you do that for like where you write and turn it?
Yeah. And it would just pop up.
So
And I'd be like,
the handwriting is
and usually I had it pre-typed out too, but if there was like an extra point, I would be like, oh, okay. So I'd be like, what's it say?
Okay, all right. I know I didn't give you your 4 minutes and 20 seconds that you were asking.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys are a little bit cheap.
Needed it.
Okay, so I just want to real quick, just have each of the groups just briefly describe the intervention you would implement to try to shape or change this behavior in a more positive way. So our green group did case study 1, which included Susie, she's the 8-year-old with autism, slapping her ears and humming. The teachers tried to use exclusionary timeout to no avail. So what's an intervention strategy that Matt and Dale and Matt and Laura, you all came up with?
We said positive reinforcement using fix and enroll and go into variable interval, and maybe the use of social stories.
Okay.
And fidget in the other hand, a fidget toy.
Okay, so fidget toy like a koosh ball or some sort of stress
like
ball or anything
yeah.
that's going to prevent her from slapping her ears.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you said positive reinforcement, right?
Whatever would be reinforcing for the student.
Okay, and what would that be like are you considering like a DRO, DRL, DRI, DR alphabet soup?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Matt?
DRO.
DRO? So as long as she's doing anything but slapping herself, even if she's swearing and spitting, we're fine with that. Naturally, Susie, I know Susie quite well, and we would rather that she was spitting and clawing at someone than, well, not clawing at somebody, but spitting and raising holy cane than what she was doing with slapping. She would actually slap them so much she started to bleed. So we'll take just about any other behavior than that, and we'll reinforce the heck out of anything other than that. So yeah, so a DRO procedure. Yep, great. How about the other group? Well, okay, go around. Mike and Amara, Tony and Ben and Mike. Yes, okay. What did you guys come up with? What was your strategy?
We decided to reinforce an incompatible behavior.
Incompatible behavior, okay.
We just decided like a stress ball.
Okay, so notice that's the same thing, stress ball, as what the first group did, but they called it a DRI, and you guys call it a DRO. Actually, you could categorize the stress ball as either one. It's fine. It's fine, because it really, it would be incompatible, but it's also an other behavior as well. So either one of those categorizations is appropriate, even though you have functionally the exact same intervention. Okay. All right. Good. Good. Okay. Now our pink group. who had Anthony, the 8th grade student who frequently makes rude or silly remarks during teacher's lessons. I think we have 3 groups here. Michaela, Summer, and Jess, what did you guys come up with as your intervention strategy?
We had a DRA, and the alternative behavior would be raising his hand or saying an appropriate remark. Okay. So raising his hand and or making an appropriate remark or addition to the class would be positively reinforced. Or reinforced, it could be, I guess, negatively reinforced as well. But some sort of reinforcement would be contingent upon that. Okay, so DRA. Let's see, good, thank you. So then we had, I believe, Alexa and Haley and Dana and Mac. What did you guys come up with?
We had DRO.
DRO?
So positive reinforcement delivered contingent on target behavior never occurring during a 10-minute interval.
So it doesn't matter what Tony does as long as he doesn't exhibit, Anthony does, as long as it doesn't, as long as he doesn't display that particular behavior. So DRO procedure, good, good. And then we had Kayla and Chelsea and Lauren. What did you guys come up with?
We had DRL. We used positive rewards to increase his art behavior, giving him like a 5-minute hall walking pass with positive praise and not exhibiting disruptive behavior. We also had the second one as extinction.
Oh, okay.
Ignoring the behavior and bearing through like the extinction out.
Yeah, yeah, and having to deal with all those fun things that happen when you put a behavior on extinction procedures. So good, good. So, so I just wanted you to go through this activity to understand that there are different ways of addressing a particular behavioral challenge. Some of them may be similar but called different things. Some of them may be very or widely different. Doesn't matter, it's not like any one of these 3 was better than the others. We just try something more palatable that has a better chance of being successful. With all of these, I hope you answered in the first prompt with a statement somewhere along the lines of, the scenario description describes that the current intervention is not working, or something along those lines. Because both scenarios had just a one-sentence statement basically implying that whatever current strategies were being utilized were not effective at decreasing that behavior. Okay, good, good. Thank you all. Those who acted as reporters, please pass yours up. And then you can reorient your seat for those who have leave. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mike's writing a novel.
Mike's writing a novel. It's okay.
Paper just had me.
You had me at green paper. Thank you, Mark. So we have, as we're moving back to our seats, and Mike's finishing up his novel, the last true-false statement that we had sorted said, and you probably shifted so many materials around, you may not have easy access to it, so let me. Yep. Oh, look at you. Got it. Thank you. So the last true-false statement was, hard to read. I have the answer written down, so I got to fold it down even more. So I can zoom in. So the last one was simply this.
That's the 6th one. 7 is the last one.
Go! I can count. So positive practice overcorrection occurs when, let me make this large enough so you can actually read it. So positive practice overcorrection occurs when you have someone repeatedly perform the inappropriate or undesirable behavior multiple times. Positive practice overcorrection occurs when you have someone repeatedly practice or perform the inappropriate behavior multiple times. Is that true or false? Everybody's relying on Tony and Mike again. Thank you, Dana. All right, thank you for responding. Thank you.
False.
False. That is false. So how, if you are correct, how would we make that statement accurate? Mike?
Looking from the positive practice overcorrection point of view, it would be appropriate or desirable behavior.
Correct. And then if you wanted to keep this phrase intact, then you have to change what is having them engage in the inappropriate or undesired behavior multiple times. What is that called? It's okay. Yeah, Chelsea.
Negative practice?
Negative practice, yes, absolutely. Okay, good. So it only took us a week and a half, actually almost close to 2 weeks, to get through punishment procedures. but we did. Okay, so in our remaining half hour, we're going to start on the topic related to differential reinforcement. Please make sure that you bring these notes back next week, but also read for the following topic, which is on generalization and self-management. Because we're going to be able to get through differential reinforcement next week and the following content as well. Okay. So, differential reinforcement is broadly the topic that is going to cover antecedent control, Tom's fading, chaining, and shaping. Some, if not many, of these topics, all of them were in the reading, but it has been my experience that many students taking this class have heard of and know a lot about these last ones. So some of this may be a review, especially next week. So let's first talk about stimulus control. So stimulus control, and I briefly mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but didn't go into great detail. But stimulus control is essentially when we can validate that the antecedent occasions the behavior. And occasions is a very specific term that's used in behavior analysis. While I would never put this in writing, I would say you could think of it this way, that antecedents cause the behavior. That's not technically correct, but if you want to think of it that way, for our purposes here in this course, that's fine. So stimulus control occurs when we can validate that some stimulus in the environment causes, or more precisely, occasions the behavior. It sets the stage for the behavior to be likely occurred. So, some examples are of stimulus control. What's the behavior that typically is associated with a green traffic light? Go, right? Exactly. What is the behavior that is typically under the stimulus control of, what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Mike?
Raising your hand.
Raising your hand and then also saying?
Answering the question.
Answering the question, which is?
Harrisburg.
Harrisburg, there we go, okay.
I wasn't sure if you wanted the...
No, all three of those are, so the behavior of raising your hand and saying Harrisburg is under the control of, what is the capital, the teacher saying, what is the capital of Pennsylvania? Or, when provided or encountering these string of letters in this particular order, occasions a behavioral response of either reading out loud or reading in your head, what is that word? Analysis. So that particular order and pattern of letters controls our internal reading in our head, which is to say the word analysis, or if you're reading out loud, to actually say it out loud. So we're going to actually revisit that last example here in just a moment. But a little bit more about stimulus control. It's essentially bringing a learned behavior under the control or signal of some antecedent. We as teachers, whatever it is that you're teaching, whether it's in a traditional school setting, or in a community setting, or in a home setting, or in a work setting, when you teach someone anything, you are trying to teach them to control their behavior under a particular stimulus.
Bless you.
Bless you. So when we are teaching manners, we teach them that if someone sneezes, you say, bless you. Right? So at some point in Mike's and my histories, somebody taught us, and probably others as well, somebody taught us that when somebody else sneezes, you're supposed to say, bless you, or God bless you, or whatever. So our behavior of saying bless you is under the control of somebody sneezing. I don't just walk around and go, bless you, bless you, bless you, unless I happen to be of a certain vocation. But that's not me. I'm sorry? I'm a priest. I'm a preacher's kid, but I don't really do any of that stuff. My dad does, but not me. So I don't typically walk around and say, bless you, bless you, bless you. I only exhibit that behavior under certain stimuli. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So my behavior of going around and saying, bless you, bless you, bless you, is under the control of somebody sneezing. So you see how you can think of that as my behavior is under the control of something, but really it's not quite that way. I mean, I still control whether I say bless you or not. So you can think of it as a behavior is under the control of some stimulus, but technically it's not quite that way. So stimulus control occurs when the appropriate behavior is emitted under the presence of that stimulus, and it is likely not emitted under other stimuli. So, when I was learning appropriate manners and how to appropriately respond in my culture, my background, in my family, when I was being educated on when and when not to say bless you after somebody sneezes, I was rewarded or reinforced for doing the appropriate thing under certain circumstances, and then I was not reinforced if I said bless you, bless you, bless you randomly for random, stupid, non-contingent reasons. So stimulus control is exhibited when a behavior is emitted in the presence of the appropriate stimulus. The appropriate stimulus is referred to as the discriminative stimulus, which is abbreviated S and then superscript D. And it is pronounced SD. So the SD is the antecedent that we want to trigger or elicit the appropriate response. S deltas are any stimulus that shouldn't elicit or occasion the behavior. So when we're thinking about demonstrating or exhibiting stimulus control, at least for me, the way I think of it is this. What's the behavior first? So if the behavior is saying bless you, then the SD is when someone sneezes. The S delta is everything else. So if I'm teaching someone this particular manner, which is appropriate in some settings and maybe isn't appropriate in every setting. Somebody sneezes, say bless you. If somebody burps and the kid says bless you, we don't reinforce that. We say, yeah, that's probably not what you should be doing. If somebody foo-foos, passes gas, breaks wind, whatever you want to call it, bless you, then that would be another S delta. I That's the word we use in my house, sorry. This was way too much. Okay, so when we're teaching any behavior, whether it's a manner or a skill or a vocation or an academic skill or a social behavior, we are trying to teach someone the appropriate SDs in which to do that behavior and the S deltas in which you don't exhibit that behavior. So, we'll go back to this example of the string of letters that are oriented in this particular pattern. So if someone encounters the word the letters A-N-A-L-Y-S-I-S, that's the stimulus. Then if the student says out loud analysis, they get reinforced. If they see this string of letters, A-N-A-L-O-G-Y, and the student says analysis, they don't receive reinforcement. They are corrected because they've made a mistake. If we repeat this process over and over and over again, where we give them this string of letters and you have them decode the word, we are helping them to establish stimulus control of reading out loud analysis. That's what we're attempting to do. So after repeated reinforcement of the printed word with those letters in that particular order, then those letters in that particular order become the discriminative stimulus for the behavior of reading out loud analysis. Eventually they will have to be on some sort of delayed reinforcement schedule or intermittent schedule because you can't stand over every kid and reinforce them for reading every single word correctly. But at least initially when they're learning how to read challenging words, you reward them for every word that they read. So we eventually, after repeated exposures of this string of letters in this particular order and accurate decoding of that word and saying out loud the word analysis, then we would say that this string of letters has demonstrated control over the behavior of reading it correctly out loud. So that's stimulus control. The S delta in this example would be any other string of letters that doesn't look like that. So when we teach any behavior, whether it's an academic or a social behavior, we are in essence teaching them to discriminate when they should elicit that behavior and when they should not. And this process of helping them understand the situations in which you should and should not elicit a behavior is known as discrimination. Discrimination in this context is not a bad thing. I know in most other contexts, discrimination is absolutely a bad thing. But in this context, in a behavioral context, discrimination is not a bad thing. So the process of discrimination is in essence teaching them to distinguish between the SDs and the S deltas. Because whatever the behavior is that you want them to know precisely when and when not to exhibit the behavior. Discrimination is a fancy way of saying or describing the process of teaching. And discrimination is the result of differentially reinforcing a behavior. So we reinforce the behavior when it occurs in the presence of the SD, but we don't reinforce it when it's exhibited in the presence of the S deltas. So a kid reads the word analysis correctly, we reinforce them. If the kid reads this word and says analysis, then we say, well, that's actually not correct. That's a different word. So we're not reinforcing that. So repeated exposures to the SD and reinforcement of it, as well as repeated exposures to the S deltas and not reinforcing the behavior, is what we describe as teaching. But from a behavioral perspective, it's just simply helping them to discriminate between stimuli. So here's another one in the math world. So 3 times 6 is the prompt. That's the SD. So what's the behavior that we want to elicit? 18. So if that's the behavior that we want to elicit, then we reinforce it. So the SD for response of 18 is 3 times 6. If they respond 18, then you give them reinforcement contingently. What is an example of an S delta to the response of 18?
Any other number?
Any other math problem that doesn't result in 18? What are additional SDs to 18 in the multiplication world?
2 times 9.
2 times 9. The identity property. I had to learn these last week. 18 times 1, that's the identity property. I had to learn all these. My kids are studying math terms. I'm like, how did we know this thing existed? Any other? That's it, right? Okay. So there are actually 3 SDs for the response of 18. 18 times 1, 3 times 6, and what was the other one we said? 2 times 9. And then, of course, you can, due to the commutative properties of those as well. All right. Wow. You guys kind of get the point? Does that make sense? I can skip it. This is all just an example. Like, if you're taking your own notes, like, believe me, you're not missing anything. If this makes sense. Oh, my gosh. Okay. So we say that a behavior that occurs only in the presence of the SD is said to be under stimulus control. So what is the discriminative stimulus for picking up your phone, answering and saying hello? What's the stimulus that elicits that response? Yes, Dale?
Phone ringing.
Phone ringing, exactly. So what do we say is under control then? In this example.
Behavior of saying hello?
Behavior of saying hello. You don't just randomly pick up your phone and say hello. Hello. That would be kind of weird. Yes, Ben?
What if you don't answer it? Is that still
So if you don't answer it, then you probably have a good reason for not answering it, right?
So, but that's still an SD. The phone ringing.
Yeah, the phone ringing typically responds. The response is this way.
Even if you don't answer it.
But if you don't answer it, like, what do you typically do then if you're not going to answer it? Let it go to voicemail, or you turn it off, you mute it.
So that's still the behavior of saying hello is not. Doesn't always follow the SD, but it's still
correct. So pretty much everybody these days has smartphones. So like when the phone rings and like an image pops up of your significant other, are you more likely to respond to that one than if it pops up caller unknown? Right?
Depending on how much trouble you are.
Yeah. Okay. Depending on how much trouble you are in. Yeah. Okay. All right. But typically, if it pops up, it's your significant other, then you're more likely or more prone to pick it up and answer it. Pick it up. Makes it sound like old fashioned. Yes, I was around in the days when you actually had to pick up a phone and it had a cord. But anyhow, that doesn't happen anymore. So
it's still an SD though.
It still is an SD because you are more likely to answer your phone by saying hello when it rings than just randomly picking up your phone and saying hello. If you do that, you kind of get funny looks. So yes, so an SD, that's a good point, Ben. The SD actually technically increases the probability that you will exhibit this behavior. Should increase. It should. Doesn't mean you will, but it increases the probability. So the phone ringing increases the probability that you will answer it, whereas the phone not ringing does not typically increase the probability that you answer it. I realize it's a double negative in there. Let me rephrase it. The absence of phone ringing means you'll leave it alone. Or you're more likely to leave it alone. So that's what stimulus control is. When someone over-selects stimulus, it means that they haven't yet firmly realized that these are the 3 math or multiplication problems that result in an answer of 18. Bless you. So stimulus over-selectivity occurs when more than just the desired SDs elicit the behavioral response that you want. So, so you give a whole bunch of anomaly. I don't even know if I'm spelling that right. Let me just erase that because I can't spell it. Not spell check. So if you get a whole list of words that have the first couple of letters in the same order and they just say analysis, 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 they've over-selected. They haven't yet determined or discriminated between the SDs and the S deltas. So stimulus over-selectivity is just simply when they have not yet fully understood or learned the particular SDs that should elicit the behavioral response. So, in your own words, I want you to describe what is stimulus control, and I want you to pair up with someone sitting next to you and just briefly identify 3 instances of stimulus control and a couple of examples of when stimulus control is not yet achieved.
Can you go back to that last slide?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. So this will be our concluding, I think it's going to be our concluding activity just because of the interest of time. And
I'm good, thank you.
Getting out. Yep. Yeah, we're just going to stop at this one. So this will be our kind of concluding thing. Come up with your own description of what stimulus control without using nerdy language like I use, 3 everyday examples of it occurring, and then 2 examples of over-selectivity. I'm going to ask for a couple of people to respond.
Behavior is writing the for the rest of the going along continue dog poops, you pick it up. But it's how it should be, yes. Some happen, that'd be a good one to add, depending on.
Gives you some.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that happens, but.
Since it wasn't too much of a bag, it was like a porch.
Or simply like.
You can go with
But that is established. That is established.
But if you don't know that,
But that's something that it is that the answer is there is an actual answer. So there is a set.
if I don't know it,
But there is one. You haven't learned it, but there is one.
I know. So stimulus control has not been established yet. It hasn't established.
But the stimulus control has been established.
Not for me. If I didn't know that category.
DSD hasn't been established.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's the discriminatory. That's not the control itself. Maybe I'm thinking too much.
I don't know. I think there is a proper answer. Or I haven't. That the stimulus basket. What's the
Like, oh my God.
It's never good for me, it's not even good for anybody else.
I don't know. Because you've got a stimulus that has to connect, make a behavior more likely. It's not. I'm going to say Harrisburg.
How are we doing?
Time.
You guys have a couple?
So it doesn't make the.
You have a couple? You have a couple? You guys have a couple? Okay, here we go. So, my behavior of ending this class and letting everybody go is going to be under the control of 3 examples of stimulus control and 2 examples of overselectivity as a group. So again, my behavior of ending class is going to be under the control of getting 5 responses, and here's the kicker, from 5 different people. I know. Okay, so pick and choose. You can tell me anyone. Dale, you had your hand raised.
You want to do overselectivity?
Either, it doesn't matter. Give us an example.
Overselectivity, soldiers saluting every other soldier when they're not supposed to. They're only supposed to salute commissioned officers.
Okay, so if someone like me had no idea what he was doing, and I really don't. If I just started, a soldier starts saluting everybody, and they're only supposed to salute a commissioned officer, that would be overselectivity. Does that happen?
Yes.
So then there's a lot of training and education that has to go into helping to get that behavior under stimulus control, right? Putting nerdy terms to what you do probably on a fairly regular basis, right? Okay, good. So I'm not going to try and write this all out. I'm just going to check them off. Okay, Lori, thank you.
Emergency vehicle lights, you pull over.
Emergency vehicle lights, you pull over. An example of stimulus control. You don't just randomly start pulling over, right? You know, actually, I just went like this. That's not pulling over. That's actually making it worse. Pulling it. Okay, all right. So that's a good example, Lori, of stimulus control. New drivers need to get that under control, and maybe I do as well. Okay, Tony.
For overselectivity, you leave chorus class where you're singing, so then you go to math class and you just start singing in the middle of class.
So I'm sorry. So okay, so you just left chorus class. No, I didn't really say. You left chorus class. You go to the next class.
Yeah, you were singing in chorus class. You go to math class and you just start singing.
When you start singing, the identity properties. Okay, yeah, that would be overselectivity, right? Whoops, not the right discriminative stimuli to start singing necessarily. Okay, Michelle Shea, yes. Thank you.
When a timer goes off, like for the microwave, you
Yep.
go over and open.
Yeah, we are all conditioned to the microwave timer. Ding! You start salivating, right? Admit it, you do. Next time, you start salivating. We are Pavlovian dogs. Here comes the microwaves. And last but not least, Michaela, excuse me, yes.
Saying thank you when someone holds the door open.
Thank you when somebody holds the door open. Absolutely. You don't just randomly walk up and people go, thank you, thank you. It's a little creepy. Enjoy your evening. For those who are going to the conference, enjoy your conference. We shall see everybody again next Tuesday. Be safe. Stay healthy. I understand there are colds going around.
I hear the popcorn is not possible. The door.
So in theory, you built up immunity.
Perhaps that's actually.
Is it going around amongst some of you?
You
should drive me to the car.
All right, I will start swatting data.
Dying and they're like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're always available to my office hours. Office hours do not work for you, and it's like another appointment. What's on your mind?
My brother made me get blood tested.
Okay. So
I get myself all
well, that's what you might want to really, that's part of the time we're going to do. I've got a couple of issues. Yeah, I'll be in there.
Those things hurt.
You read for tonight, or if you've got an entrance site class. So, one of the things that I take upon myself in this department to do with the first year students, since I have you guys once in the fall and then sometimes 2, if not even 3 times in the spring and summer, is I shape your writing skills. So this semester, there were certain things I'm looking for in APA with regard to APA format. In the spring, the criterion actually increases. So right now, let's just say there were, I don't know, a dozen or so things that I was looking for in terms of APA style and format. Sure. In the spring, it actually gets to be more, because then in your second year, there's an increased level of expectation. So it is not unusual for students to really wrestle with APA throughout their entire 2+ years here. But it is also equally not unusual for students in their first semester, their first year, really have difficulties because, depending upon your background, now you were education major, right?
So a lot of MLA.
So yeah, so folks who have to make the switch from MLA to APA have an increased challenge because you're going from like French to English. And this version of English is messy and ugly and gross. So you and others are in a particularly difficult situation because of that switch. So yes, I'd be more than happy to.
And then just general things like maybe things you would say like this would be. I know you put comments on the side, but just to I prefer to continue getting better.
Absolutely, and you will. Everybody does. If for no other reason, you get lots more practice because you're going to be writing papers for all of your other classes, especially your first year. And then in the spring semester, you write a lot of papers. Okay. Are you guys taking the development class right now?
No.
747 or something like that? No.
No, I think that's next semester.
Okay. The reason I ask is that one there's a heavy amount of writing in that one. In some years we've moved it to your first semester. In other years it's in your spring semester of your first year. And I just couldn't remember where it was placed for you guys. Okay. So in 746 there's a lot of writing. In 746 these are all spring semester classes. Okay. There's a lot of writing in 2 out of the 4 classes. So this semester I don't think you have a ton of writing.
No, and not as in depth. Like yours is probably
this is
in depth in terms
absolutely.
Of style.
So this is kind of like you get hit really hard with this one. Mm-hmm. Not you, but in general, people get hit really hard with this one because it's the first one, and it's one of the few in your first semester where you've got to write more of like a professional type of paper. And then it becomes a little bit easier as you get more practice. But yeah, I'm more than happy to sit down and talk about things.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. Hey man, were you waiting around for voting?
No, I was curious in the same topic because I missed 3 points on.
So basically, I'm shaping up your behavior. So there were certain things I look for now, and then I add on next semester. So while it does constitute a portion of your grade, it is historically not one that deep sixes anybody in this class. In other words, like, and it's not appropriate for me to disclose, nor would I even remember what your grades were. But most students who maybe don't do as well in this particular project or this particular paper still end up doing fine overall, and by fine I mean unless like the bottom falls out, they still get strong. Still get A's. People still get A's.
Okay.
I should stop beating around the bush. It's only the individuals who consistently underperform on quizzes and do a really cruddy job on the project, like your team project. Those are the people that are at risk of being a B. I think in my 8 years here, I've only given out 1 C, and that person actually earned it. I'm not only giving out C's. I don't want to give out bad grades at all, but they earned a C. Historically, though, it is not unusual for virtually all students in this class to get A's. So, like, I don't want you to, like, get freaked out about your overall.
No, it's like an 83, so it wasn't like I looked at it, I was like, oh, I'm going to fail. But it was like, I would, because the comments you made, I was like, those are things that I'm not as familiar with.
And like, when you turn in your report for your project with your teammate, while I am looking for APA things in there as well, that type of a paper really doesn't lend itself to a whole lot of APA formatting things, because you're not really citing references, and you don't have a big long reference section. So I could certainly go back and look, but my recollection off the top of my head is that like the average on that APA paper is like a 94, 95, like at a class average. So it's pretty darn high. And then the presentation that you do, I mean, unless you like don't show up or you don't talk, you pretty much get 18, 19 out of 20. Not, it's pretty rare that somebody gets like a 17 or below out of 20. So it's easy to bring your grade, your overall grade up, even if you were dissatisfied with your performance on the paper, because there's a lot of other ways to gain those points. And like I said, just using the past 8 years and students in our program as examples, I really don't think people have much to worry about overall for their grade. But I also appreciate and I respect the fact that you want to improve your writing skills, and that's good, because that shows to me that you're obviously interested in doing well in the class, but you also want to learn a skill that's important for class.
Right.
So it's not just about getting the grade; it's about learning a skill, which is good.
And because I mean, like an undergraduate, it was 98 was usually what I got.
Yeah.
But coming here, it's much more specified in terms of.
Well, that's it. When you take an undergraduate class, depending on how many students are in the class, there's I can devote a lot more time and energy into reviewing 21 papers.
Sure.
Because that's the biggest thing I got graded this semester. Well, that and the paper at the end. But if I was teaching a class of 60 students and I had 3 of those sections and I had to read 180 papers, I wouldn't be scrutinizing them like this. But that's also the nature of graduate school as well. Is the demands and the standards really ratchet up. And you guys everybody in here is up to the task. I have no concerns about anybody whatsoever in terms of their writing skills. It's a behavior that really is difficult, it's complex, and needs to be shaped up. And frankly, I still personally am shaping my own writing skills because I still make mistakes. I'll submit a manuscript for publication, it'll come back from the editors, and they're like, you did this, this, and this wrong. I'm like, so and I've been at this now for about as long as some of you have been alive, so I'm approaching that at least. Wow, that's really scary to think about that. But anyhow, that's for me to kind of wrestle with mentally. So yeah, it's writing an APA style is not easy, and most of us would agree that it's a really stupid way of doing things at times, but it is the way we have to write. So I don't think you guys have much to worry about. It's good that you're concerned, but you'll have lots of opportunities to improve upon that. And if you have specific questions, come to my office hours. If they don't work for you, then just let me know. I can make an arrangement to meet with you otherwise.
Awesome.
Okay?
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely.
I blame my peer edit, Tony.
Both you guys are going tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good, good. Enjoy, take advantage. And I forgot to mention this to everybody else. When you're at the Beef and Brew, don't huddle around together with just people that you all know. It's an opportunity to network and meet other people. Take advantage of it. I mean, I know it's easy and comfortable to stand there with your group of friends and sip your beer, have your wine, and eat a couple of cheese and crackers. But go out and meet people. Go up and say, hi, I'm Bellier. Hi, I'm Mac. Because many of the people that you will be meeting tomorrow very likely could be people that you would be wanting to intern with a year and a half from now. So it doesn't hurt to start. And a lot of them are my good friends. And I know that they see this as an opportunity to kind of see the future of school psychology in Pennsylvania, but it's also an opportunity for some of them to be like, Does that person have the social skills that I can see them working in my district as an intern 2 years from now? I don't want to say it's like a test, like don't get nervous, but I mean, you know, if you're over in the corner acting all goofy or weird, they'd be like, I don't. So it's an opportunity. I would encourage, and you might see me kind of prodding some of you on like, hey, you know, don't stand around with all 20 of you together. Go meet somebody else. It's okay. And it's an opportunity to kind of network, even though you're still early on in your careers. Seize every chance you can to network, and that's the place to do it. So I'm glad you guys are going. We'll look forward to seeing you there. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.